All right.
Introduce your first candidate, Joe, the demo.
Well, thank you for being here. You see Ipswich, and thanks for that.
We'll start with you, Nishan.
Welcome.
Thank you.
First question that we have for you today was, so you submitted your resume and so would you mind taking just a couple of minutes to tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're interested in this time, and what your qualifications?
That's a lot of stuff to cover. We only got an hour, but I'll do my best. So I got into government a little around 10 years ago. Sorry. Is that okay here? Okay.
Like we always say, just keep talking and we'll figure out that.
All right. So I got into government about 10 years ago. I started working for the Metropolitan Area Planning Council as a municipal services coordinator, and spent a lot of time. That was a great opportunity to really learn a lot about different aspects of municipal government. I worked with town managers, but also with planning directors and economic development directors and DPW directors and fire chiefs and police chiefs around the North Shore particularly, and help them look at different ways to make their government operations a little more efficient, if that's what they were looking for, just to collaborate. I also got into working on hazard mitigation plans and preparing for natural disasters primarily, but sea level rise, climate change as well. From there I got the opportunity to go to Winthrop, where I've been in charge of grants, economic development, and special projects. We're building a marsh walk in Winthrop that will skirt the entire the northern edge of the town, or the southern edge of the Belle Isle Marsh. And the purpose of that project was to create stewardship in the marsh. The Belle Isle Marsh is the last urban salt marsh in the state. It's not quite as big as your Great Marsh up here, but it's certainly a resource worth being protected. And there's been a lot of conservation around the East Boston Revere sides of it, but in Winthrop we were kind of cut off from it. So we're creating a new park and boardwalk across the marsh that will help invite the community to understand the marsh and appreciate it more. We're hoping this leads to even further conservation. That's the goal of that. I'm involved in budget planning and all aspects of working with the different department heads to help them understand what their needs are so that they can provide for the town and figure out ways to get it for them. So that was a short version. Good morning. Well, I tend to be goal-oriented or object-oriented, so I'm a collaborative type of person that likes to work with people. If you identify a problem, then you work with the people around it to understand the problem and figure out the best solution. That kind of buy-in helps create the opportunity for people to really work towards the same goal and accomplish it. We've done that with some of the things that we're trying to do around economic development in the town of Winthrop. We've done a master planning process, and we're even now improving on that as far as inviting more people into the conversation and refining our solution. All our towns have kind of similar challenges these days. We have costs that are difficult to contain, but we have a tight budget that can only grow by a certain amount every year. We have to be imaginative about how we find ways to solve that problem, that gap. One way to do it is to find more money. That's usually through development. The other way to do it is to find ways to save money, and that's usually through creating new efficiencies, either using new technologies to make our jobs easier so that we don't have to work as hard, collaborating with neighboring communities or communities have similar problems on a shared solution. So those are the types of things that I've been looking at really since I was at MAPC. I'm on a committee in the town of Swampscott where I live that looks at efficiency and regionalization and outsourcing, just whatever methods we can find to make government work more streamlined. And that's not to say that we're looking to get rid of jobs. It's looking for opportunities. Maybe when somebody retires, we decide that we don't need to replace that person because we can do it a different way. That's both short-term and long-term solution to the problem, because then you don't have the costs of the employee forever afterwards. So in Swampscott, we're trying to do that. In Winthrop, we're trying to do that. I think that that's something that Ipswich should be looking at, and I'd be happy to help with.
Thank you for being with us today. My question really has to do with your management style. I'm going to slide into it sideways. I see that you are currently an assistant town manager.
Yes, sir.
And having watched what happens in the town management career, how do you think that is different? How would being the town manager different from being an assistant?
Well, I mean, I think different people have different management styles. I'm going to have to. I adopt the management style that fits my personality the best. I'm a collaborative person. I'm an open person. I prefer to sit down with people early on, ahead of time, and try to predict what our challenges are and come to solutions. And I prefer to be open with people. If there's an issue that needs to be addressed, you address it head on. I sit and talk to people, our department heads, some of their subordinate staff all the time about the issues they see, the challenges that they see in their departments. And we, again, you first have to agree on what's the objective, what's the main goal of the department, of the town, and then make sure that whatever solution we come up with satisfies that objective. I've got a good working relationship with all the department heads and with all of the subordinate staff. I'm happy working in the town of Winthrop. The reason I'm looking for this opportunity is that I went back to school to get a degree in municipal management so that I could be a municipal manager. We have an interim town manager in Winthrop right now who's just been offered the job. He's a great guy. I love working with him, but we're the same age. He's going to be there a while. I have to look for my opportunities elsewhere. I love the town of Ipswich. This goes back to Nishan's first question, which I guess I left off at the beginning. Sorry about that. But my wife and I, we bring our kids up here a couple times a year. During the warm weather, it's a couple times a month to participate in different things up here. We love the restaurants in your town. We love going out to Marini Farm, up to the Castle Hill. It's a great little community that I feel is in some ways very similar to Winthrop and in some ways very different. You have a lot of land. Winthrop does not have a lot of land. You have just under 15,000 people. Winthrop has just under 20,000 people. So we have a lot more people and a lot smaller piece of land in Winthrop, but otherwise we're similar. We have very small commercial bases, about 8% in Winthrop, about 9% or 10% here in Ipswich. You're looking to try to expand that without hurting the character of the town. That's the exact same thing that the Winthrop is trying to do. Grow responsibly so that you can meet your future obligations without hurting the town. But continue to improve public services and continue to improve your infrastructure without hurting the town's character, without changing it. People come to Ipswich for a particular reason. I'd be coming for the same reason. It's a great little town. It's a great place to be. Did I get to that question? I was wandering a little bit there, Bill.
And more, so we've opened up a couple of follow-on questions, if you don't mind.
That's fine.
One of the things that all of that implies is that if you have a good working relationship and everybody agrees on what we're trying to accomplish, we can work as a team. In areas where you need to encourage people in terms of accountability, how do you handle those kinds of things?
Well, again, I try to get ahead of it. You work towards, annual goals with your employees, with your department heads and your staff, and you sit down at the beginning of the year and say, these are the things we're going to work on this year, and have milestones. And when you get to a midway point of the year or 9 months into the year and you can say, okay, we're not quite getting to these milestones, what are the challenges that you're having getting there? Is there some way I can help you? As long as you're open and communicative with the people under you, you're giving them the opportunity to solve their problems ahead of time. If you get to the end of the year and they still haven't met those goals and you've given them all of the things that they've asked for, then it's time to have the tougher conversation. But I do my best to try to avoid those by getting ahead of them. We talk to our people all the time about wanting to, plan their work and then work to their plan. So we're trying to do that. I would try to do that. But at the end of the day, you have an obligation to the town to make sure the work is getting done, make sure the goals are being met. And you just have to be upfront with the folks that we work with that at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're meeting our goals. And if we're not meeting our goals, then there are going to be, repercussions from that.
One last point, privilege on my part. You mentioned that Winthrop is one of these areas that is small but trying to develop without changing the character of the town too much. We have a lot more land, but are there one or two or three principles that you encountered that seem to work pretty well? Because we're certainly looking at the future of Ipswich, wondering how it's going to evolve and still maintain what we consider to be, this is sometimes an approach to the character of Ipswich. What have you learned in your experience?
Well, I've learned that everybody has a little bit different understanding of what the character of the town is, right? So you have to try to have those people sit around the table together and share their thoughts. We talk a lot in Winthrop about responsible development, about, growing in the places where it's appropriate. So for us right now, that is our center, and it may in the future be along the Winthrop waterfront. Those are two opportunities for the town to see a little bit more density in terms of residential growth that would help support the underlying commercial that exists there already. I think that it's important to keep in mind that when you take into a neighborhood, it's easy for the people outside that neighborhood to say, oh, that's a great place, let's go develop in the center. And then the people who are already living in the center going, wait a minute, we already have parking problems, we already have traffic problems, I don't want anybody else living on top of me. So you have to have those conversations with them. We're having those conversations. We're getting to some understanding. The folks in the neighborhood have been, rightfully a little nervous, but I think they're starting to understand where the town's coming from. And as long as we keep that communication open with them, we keep them aware of what the goal is, and that we're sensitive to their concerns, we'll get there. Ipswich probably has to have the same kind of conversation. Your solutions here might be slightly different, but the general principles are the same. You need, in particular, you need to be able to provide, outside of government-led services, you need to provide for the wants of your citizenry. You have a nice downtown that's doing pretty well. You want to grow that area. You have some things that Winthrop doesn't have. You have an employer who has 1,000 people a day during the daytime hours in your downtown. Winthrop would kill to have that. We don't have that. That helps your shops. That helps your restaurants a little bit. Your dry cleaners or your accountants or your lawyers, whoever's taking up those, hanging their shingles on Main Street, Market Street, as the case may be. You've got that, and I'm sure that we want to keep EBSCO and New England Biolabs and stuff here in town, but you want to do it in a way that, protects that downtown feel of the town, right? So you'll look for ways to...
She's trying to adjust the mic so you don't get, because we're getting a little bit of feedback.
That was a little bit of a difference.
The mic will pick you up.
Okay. So you'll look for ways to have that conversation with EBSCO and with the folks in the downtown area about what it is that is appropriate, that will meet the needs of EBSCO and the needs of the town. You'll also want to look at other things that you can take advantage of. I think that you get a lot of visitors every year to Crane Beach. I'm sure the traffic and parking is a problem for you. I believe several years ago you had a shuttle bus that was running from the commuter rail out, and that was funded through some kind of a grant. There might be an opportunity to reevaluate that. Is there, what's the cost of managing that, and is there another way that we can fund that, or is there a new grant that we can go after to fund that? So that brings more visitors into your town without creating all the congestion on your streets. Partner with the business community, have them offer specials. If somebody's coming into town by commuter rail to go to Crane Beach, maybe they get 20% off at a dinner in downtown. That helps the business, and it helps you present yourself in a different way. You know, you have other areas of the town that have different needs, the waterfront and, you know, your town wharf. Took a look at that a little while ago. It looks like you could probably use some help from the state in making fixing it up a little bit. The public ramp, I think, needs a little bit of work. You have to look for opportunities to do those things and embrace that part of your identity as well as the farming community. They have their needs. So, again, to me, it's always all about the relationships. It's about having open communication with people, conversations, discussions about what it is you're trying to accomplish as a town and how you can do that and serve everybody. Sure.
Pronounce your last name.
Domolovitz.
Delalovitz?
Yep.
Do you prefer Joe or Joseph?
Joe's fine. No problem.
How did Winthrop fare in this one?
We had, I was there till about 20 minutes before the first high tide yesterday, and we had some water in the streets, but to that point, it hadn't been too bad. I did hear later in the afternoon from the fire chief that we took a couple people out of a home on Pico Ave, and that, and I'm guessing that last night's might have been a little bit rougher because the tide was supposed to be a little higher. I may try to get down and Winthrop this afternoon to see how we're doing again. But we had a pretty good plan going in. The January 4th storm really opened our eyes in a couple of areas of town that hadn't traditionally flooded. We were used to the Atlantic side of the town getting overtopped from storms, and on January 4th, instead of the high winds and overtopping, we just had inundation. The sea level just kept rising. So this storm had a little bit of both. We had a lot of high winds, but the water was coming up because of several successive hours or high tides of the water staying in. So we're worried about tonight, or this afternoon, and then even tonight, again around midnight. So we'll keep in touch.
Let me ask a question that's not, it's not exactly one of the questions, but I think it gets to one of the questions. I'd ask you to think about maybe two different ways. So the question is, think for a moment about what your priorities would be, say, in the first year. Think of it as a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day bucket. And when I say think about it in two different ways, I'd like you to first forget that try your best to forget that you're here and you're trying to tell us about the Ipswich stuff first. Just tell us, let's say you landed in this spot, and you were going to be the chief executive. Think of it that way. So what would you want to do? Forget the issues themselves. So give us just sort of a minute or two about, okay, this is what I first want to do is X, and next I want to do Y, and then a little later Z in my first year. And then answer it for what it specifically means.
So the first thing I'd want to do is I'd want to get in and understand, the budget completely, not just from looking at the numbers on the page and understanding where you're spending your money, but understanding why you're spending your money in different departments. So that would be a lot of meeting with department heads, meeting with the boards and committees that they work with and for, understanding what their goals are so that we could make sure that we're doing that in the right way. I've said frequently that I envision my first 100 days as being 100 meetings in 100 days. To come into a new place cold, I've got to try and start establishing relationships as quickly as possible. And that means meeting with as many different groups of stakeholders in the town as possible. So your business community, but your department heads, all of you, members, chairs at least of the other boards and committees in town, the principal owners of the largest employers in town, understanding what their needs are, not just EBSCO, but New England Biolabs, and there's a Ware Valve company. So, understanding what their needs are and what their long-term prospects for staying here in town are. Again, I'm mixing them for you, sorry, but I mean that number one's budget, number two is meetings, and number three is planning for the future. Where do we go from here? Now I understand your budget. Now I understand, who the people are and what their goals are and what their wants, desires are for the future. Now it's planning. How do we make sure that we stay on track to meet those goals going forward? And I started to drift into Ipswich there in the first part of that answer. Sorry about that, Ed. But yeah, here you'd want to meet with the business community. You'd want to meet with the farming community, the fishermen. You'd want to meet with, as I said, the boards and committees, the department heads, the employees, the heads of each of the unions, the head of municipal light, understand what they need, how they're moving forward, and if there are things that we want to change about that, tweak about that. But I also want to do a good, in the longer term out, and then when you get out past the 100 days, 6 months, you'd start planning for longer-term planning, as far as not just next year and the next 2 or 3 years after that, but start to identify where is the community where's the town from an employee standpoint going to stand, as far as, do we have people retiring? Are we going to want to start to plan for replacing those people or replacing the functions that they provide in some other way? Again, always with my eye on modernizing the operation as much as possible.
I heard four, tell me if I'm wrong. Budget.
Yep.
Let's get to know the
Yep.
budget. Second, sort of listening sessions.
Yep.
Third, you said planning for the future.
Yes.
So, and then fourth, you said planning for the walk around.
Right.
All right. So give us that in Ipswich. So now you are the town manager. Tell us what you're going to do in the first year. When things are on your plate, both externally that you know are coming up and that I think are important that may or may not be on our radar already.
So things that are already on your radar, obviously, you have a vote coming up on the elementary school. I mean, once I get past my meetings and budget, I'm going to need to focus on that as well. The elementary school and EBSCO and the 40B challenge that you have, meeting with those folks and trying to determine what the different goals are in each of those categories. Those are very different challenges that you have coming up. And do the kids want to come in? This is government at its finest.
Let's go Pinewood Derby.
Oh, I remember doing that when I was a kid.
We also have our model automobile derby downstairs. So even though that happens to be the hallway, we're hearing, eventually we're going to hear the screams and yells when the cars are coming down.
Yeah, you can appreciate. You remember when your voice was that high, right?
I have an 11-year-old son. His voice is still that high, so I appreciate it very well.
They're our future and we love them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got off track there. But, with EBSCO, I think that it's important. I know that you've had some conversations already with them around what their proposal is. They want to grow in town. I'm sure the town wants to keep them. As long as we can stay focused on that shared goal, I think that the town will be able to find a solution, and that's one of the things that I'd be working on right away, because I think that's an important thing. I think it's something that the state's paying attention to. I know for a fact that the state is trying to make sure EBSCO stays in Massachusetts, so we want to make sure that's in Ipswich. We want to look long-term. If we're going to build one elementary school, what are we going to do with that other site? I believe there's been a proposal out there is that could potentially be a site. If the current proposal were to go forward, that could potentially be a site for a fire station or a public safety building. You have needs in both departments of the public safety department. So those are longer term, but not the super long term. Those are things that need to get addressed, but you need to understand the finances of that. How much does it cost to build a public safety building? How much does it cost to take down an elementary school, if that's the way you decided to go? We're doing some of that strategic planning in Winthrop right now, so I have some familiarity with it. We have an old middle school that we're trying to determine what to do with. We have a large group of people that wants to put a public safety building there, so we're in the middle of that planning right now. That's on our end for our needs in Winthrop. That's a $30 million proposal. So how do you right-size that for Ipswich, and what's that cost for you? And then how do you plan that into your long-term debt? Because there's not going to be any way to do it and pay for it in 1 year. So you have to figure out what your strategic plan for funding that debt is. And as I said, then the longest term is just kind of making sure that you're always looking way down the road at how the operation moves and it changes. There's been huge changes in technology just in the last 5 or 10 years, things that we can do to things that we can do to make the government operate more smoothly, and also communicate it out to the people that we serve. This is a short-term goal. We're just in the middle of bringing on a software technology in Winthrop that will help explain our budget and our budget process to folks. It's an open checkbook source of software that, with a link right from our front page on our town website, and people will be able to click into that, and not only will they be able to see what we're spending our money on, but they'll be able to pick from a group of cohort communities to see how we rate against our neighbors or against other communities similar in size and demographic to us, and see how we're doing against what other folks spend on police, fire, education. So I think those types of things help inform the residents, and that helps them make a decision about how to support the government going forward.
Could I ask a follow-up, if pleases the chair of the subcommittee?
Sure.
So one of the things that you mentioned was, let's drill into that a little bit. So, it's a great idea, right? It's a good answer, too. It's a good stock answer. But let's talk about how that works. How does that work? So you sit in your desk. Somehow there's an idea that you want to have a long-term plan. So you could either answer it how you think probably should do it here, how you've done it in the past, or if you could just do it from a blank slate. Because again, it's you could do it in the context. You're a town manager at a town that has committees, public involvement and all that. Or you could just say, well, no, I'm going to do it about it, how I'll create my long-term plan in my office and then roll it out.
Well, I don't think that it should be done in an office, with just a few people. I think a long-term plan has to be something that's engaging in as much of the community as possible. In order to a long-term plan, you have to know what your long-term goals are. Some of that is a function of what the staff is able to tell you and the department heads are able to tell you. Some of that's a function of what the Board of Selectmen wants you to do, what town meeting expects the town to do as far as staying on a particular budget. But the first step in that process is to establish what the goals are. And then you sit down with the key department heads, particularly finance, the finance commission, the department head that is affected, police, fire, superintendent of schools, whoever it is, and the superintendent of water and wastewater, whoever it is, understand what they project as their long-term resources to be able to get to that goal. And then you'll be able to figure out if there's a gap or if there's something else that has to be addressed there. We'd never bring you a proposal to do anything as the Board of Selectmen or the town meeting without being able to tell you how it affects you, how it affects the town budget, and what that means to the individual ratepayer or taxpayer, as the case may be. We would have that information for you when we came to you. So our end is not to necessarily determine what the goals of the town are. That's a shared conversation that has to involve, as I said, the Board of Selectmen, the different stakeholder groups, and the staff. But the staff's job is to bring you a proposal to accomplish that goal in a budget that the town can live with. And you'd always have those answers from me. Ed, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's a good answer.
All right.
All right. So you've been doing your homework. So you've mentioned the EBSCO proposal and the school proposal. The school one's been around for a little longer, but the EBSCO one's a little newer. These currently may be two of the most polarizing issues that we've encountered in a while and will be encountering. The community in some cases is at odds, just completely split, and it's in some cases I think people would say it's gotten a little toxic. So how, as a town manager, would you improve a sense of a community? How would you improve people's belief in town government? And I've heard, you mentioned open conversations, getting in early, that kind of a thing. How would you do that? How would you build trust in our community, and how would you communicate that out?
So, it's been my experience that most of the time when people are, when the discussion starts to go towards the toxic side, is because they either don't have enough information or they don't have the right information. Communication and sharing of information is probably one of the most important things we do in town government, and most towns don't do it very well. Quite frankly, most towns rely on traditional forms of media to get their message out. They rely on what the state law tells them to do as far as noticing for meetings and things. We need to be more proactive than that. I would envision, a multi-pronged approach to communicating the town's goals and plans through the town website, through ICAM, but also through social media platforms. We'd have to develop a social media policy for the town. There is a growing number of people that get and share information through social media. If we don't meet them where they are, they're going to become our biggest detractors. If we meet them where they are, we can help them understand what we're trying to do, and they become our biggest cheerleaders. We'd want to outreach to people as much as possible through, in Winthrop, the town manager has what they call the town manager's blog, but it's an e-newsletter. People in town sign up for it. They send in their name and their email address, and they get added to the list, and every week they get, 5 or 6 pages of information about what's going on in town. I'd look to establish that same kind of thing here. I think we have 5,000 or 6,000 people on the e-distribution list in Town Hall in Winthrop. That same distribution list gets to be used for other things then, too. If we have an emergency notification we send out, we can send it out through that. We can let people know if there's a meeting coming up. Every time we go to a meeting, or have a public meeting, we have a sign-up sheet, and we ask for people's email address so that we can include them on future notices of email, of meetings that have to do with that topic, so we can engage them even more. The more information you share with them, the better it is. Winthrop is just kind of getting to that point now. We're doing a lot better job of it. Like I said, I know this a little bit from firsthand experience. We thought we did a great job publicizing the master planning meetings. We had 200 people show up at the meetings. I thought, this is great. This is a great turnout. And then afterwards, we had people say, I never even knew you were doing this. So we have to continue to improve and find other ways to reach those folks. I found that, in particular for a particular conversation, if you want to have people engaged, school lunch boxes are the best way to get information home to parents, because until around the 5th or 6th grade, parents go through their kids' lunchbox, their backpack every day, and they'll read what's there. At least, if they don't come, at least they know what's going on. And it's an inexpensive kind of old school way of getting information out, but you have to engage the other forms of media. We have to have our information on the website. We've started putting any project or plan or presentation that's been made at a public meeting, we just put it on the website the next day. And there's a tab just for projects, plans, and presentations. People can go there and find the most recent one or the one that they're looking for. And it gives them information that they can have to help make their decisions and have their conversations in the coffee shop or wherever they're talking to their friends and neighbors. It doesn't clear up all the issues, but it gets the conversation started out where you're all at least on the same page. And we've gone back in the last few months, places where people didn't have enough information about something we were doing, we've recreated new groups of information and put it out, and taken it to the town council and told them, this is what we found and this is what we did. And we put that on the website as well. And we invite everybody, if you have a question, email the town manager, call the town manager, we'll answer the question for you. So that kind of openness, that kind of transparency creates trust and creates at least a willingness for people to hear what you have to say. They're not always going to agree with your approach, but you have to at least start out from a position of common understanding, common information.
Okay, thanks.
One of the questions I have. One of my areas, you get a job here, you see how we do this, and you see some things that we've been doing for the last 25 years. You say, there might be a better way of doing this. What I prefer to know here is, well, this is how we got started. So, because I actually don't like that. I hate that. This is how you always do it. Have it. So I want to know that you have the ability, the strength to say to the Board of Selectmen, this is what you guys are doing. I think there's a better way. I have some experience with this, and it worked. And now, it's up to us whether we're going to say, yeah, we think that's great if you do it, or as opposed to, well, this is how you're going to do it.
Well, Essex Committee in Swampscott. That's what I've been trying to do since I was at MAPC, is help communities find new ways to do the things that they do. There's certain things you have to do. State law requires you to do certain things. Just tradition allows you to do certain things in a different way. But, do we believe that we should still be doing our payroll all on paper? We have computers that can do that much faster and quicker and make more efficient use of the time of our staff. There's no reason to keep doing things a certain way just because that's the way we've always done it. But I wouldn't just come to you and say, hey, I have this experience. I'd be researching other ways to do things if I thought there was an inefficiency there, and I'd be coming to you and show you how it could benefit us in the long run. If we switch payroll over from a paper system to a software-based system where our employees log in their hours and it all gets sent right away to finance, now that frees up the time of the person in finance that you used to spend all that time doing the data entry. That person can do something else. That's something that they might find more interesting and more challenging and more rewarding. It makes the town overall a better operation. So it's not just about not doing it because that's the way we've always done it, but about finding the best way to do it going forward and understanding that we may implement something this year, in 8 or 9 years from now, when I'm on my third contract, we have to change again because now, new technology or something's come along that's allowed us to do something a different way, or a new opportunity to partner with somebody has allowed us to a new efficiency. So we should always be looking at that, and that's the job of the town manager, is to bring those suggestions to you. So it's not just that I would want to go along to get along. My job is to make sure that we're doing things in the most efficient way possible.
So Ipswich has a pretty robust shellfish industry, and with that comes a lot of concerns, not just in the shellfish industry, but throughout the town with climate change and preserving our natural resources. Yep. And sustainability. So could you tell us about some of your efforts in that regard?
Well, unfortunately, most of Winthrop's shellfish beds are not able to be clammed right now because we're right near the airport, so we always wind up with the situation where a lot of the beds are contaminated. We're not allowed to pull from there. It used to be a pretty active shellfishing community down there as well, and unfortunately, that's not the case currently. But I would not profess to be an expert about the shellfish industry, but I would profess that I think that through the Great Marsh Coastal Adaptation Plan, I see a lot of good ideas in that plan, and the big thing I see is that your partners are all involved, your neighboring partners are all involved, Rowley's, Essex, the other towns that share the marsh with us. That's a great way to approach protecting that resource, right? In Winthrop, I am on the Metro Mayor Coalition's task force for climate change and sea level rise. We meet as a function of the Metro Mayor's Coalition, which is overseen by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and 11 or 12 communities agreed to work on climate change issues together. So they put their planners or assistant town managers or whatever in a room together, and we kind of try to research what the work plan is and bring it back to the Metro Mayors together. Climate change isn't going to just affect Ipswich, and whatever we do here is going to affect Essex and Rowley. So we need to work together with our partners to make sure that whatever efforts we're undertaking, they're going to be successful if we do it as part of a region. So I'm glad to see that plan looked at the entire region. I'd look to open up communications with our counterparts in those communities, and then bring that to the state and say, we need help. We need to, this isn't just something that's important to our livelihood or important to our way of life in Ipswich and Essex. It's also important to the state as a whole. The Great Marsh is a great natural barrier to sea level rise. If we can protect it, it will help protect the communities that are inland of us as well. And the state has to understand the importance of that kind of investment as well. Sea level rise and climate change, whatever their causes, and I know that gets debated very hotly among different groups of people, but you can't look at what's been happening in the last few storms and see the way it's changing our coast and say that we shouldn't be planning a way to try to protect ourselves. The marsh is a very, very important natural resource that needs to be protected, not just for the clamming industry, but just for the way the town of Ipswich and our surrounding neighbors all live. So I jump right into that. And I already have very good relationships at the state with coastal zone management and some of the other agencies that are involved with that. Like I said, we got permission to build in an ACEC, build a marsh walk, because they understood that our vision for creating stewardship in the marsh by having people visit it and understand it better. I've never met anybody that went out on the marsh and didn't immediately fall in love with it. And once you fall in love with something, you want to protect it. So that's why we're building the marsh walk in Winthrop, and that'll open this June. So we met with DEP and we went through the MEPA process and CZM and Army Corps of Engineers to help them understand what we're trying to do. Those kind of efforts, you have to have those kind of conversations with your partners at the state to help them understand what it is you're trying to do and why it's so important.
So moving inland a little bit, how about other sustainability projects, solar or, green buildings, that type of?
So, I brought the Green Communities program to Winthrop. One of the program's major tenets was that you had to be open to establishing renewable energy projects in the town. Well, the town's pretty much built out, and what isn't built out is in conservation land, so we couldn't do that, but we pledged to find other ways to do it. And we have about 2 years ago, after becoming a green community, we signed a power purchase agreement with an entity that built a solar farm in Haverhill that helps give us credit towards meeting that that renewable energy criteria in our green communities plank, because we couldn't do it here, so we gave renewable energy credits to a company that could do it somewhere else. They had to be part of the national grid system because Winthrop's a national grid community. Here, your challenge with becoming a green community is that you have a municipal light plant, and the electric light company doesn't pay that charge the way Engrid and Eversource do. So we have to find either a resident in town who works for one of the big utility companies. I know that your folks in your planning department are talking with green communities, because I asked green communities that, and they're looking for ways to get it here. The other way is that the municipal light company could adopt a small add-on tariff that would make you eligible to become a green community and open you up to those resources to be able to green your buildings, green your local facilities. So I also think that you can do things around, we've done a solarized program in Winthrop, which is partnered with a residential solar provider and made them available to the residents in town. They don't have to, the town doesn't give any money to it. We just go through the process of finding somebody that's reputable and that's going to be able to do the work at a good price, and then through the utility company, they're able to find ways to get loans or things that they can pay off through their utility bills to get solar installed on their rooftops. So you look for different ways to do that. You have the opportunity here. You have land. If the town wanted to build solar here, you could. I don't know that that's what you want to do. Certainly, it's a conversation you'd have to have with the light company. I know the light company's done a lot of work. From what I've seen, it seems like they've done a lot of work the last couple of years to try to diversify where they get their energy from, which is great. You'd want to work with them and to just keep that going. But bringing green communities to Ipswich is possible. We just have to, keep working with DOER on that. It may involve a slight adjustment on the electric bills to be able to become a green community, but there's no reason that we shouldn't pursue those types of things for Ipswich. And I know that from talking to DOER, there have been a group of citizens in town that have been actively trying to do that for a number of years. So, it's a conversation the Board of Selectmen should have. This is something that we want to pursue as a town objective, and then then we turn around and have that same conversation with the light company and say, this is something that the town needs, something we should be on board with. So it sets a good example too for residents. If the town is trying to green the way it powers itself, then the residents know it's something that's important that they should pay attention to.
Thank you.
Appreciate the comments about the marsh and conservation. How would you classify yourself? Do you think you're an environmentalist or someone who just knows a lot about it and uses it as it's appropriate?
Well, I think it's part of my job. It's a part of my job to understand the marsh. It's part of my job to understand how that impacts our town. I don't belong to any environmental groups, but I try to recycle appropriately. I try to do things that I can do as an individual human being. I am a conservationist. I believe that we should be trying to protect our natural resources as much as possible. You know, those things, that you even within that realm, you can kind of run into conflicts, right? You know, you're trying to protect one resource, and then you find out that you're maybe, you know, exposing another. It's a difficult thing. You know, environmentalists are always, you know, I love the argument about people saying that we should all be switching to electric cars, and then the other people say, well, what are you going to do with all the batteries when they're no good anymore? You know, that becomes a potential problem down the road.
Policy issues.
Yeah, there are always public, right. And so I'm not so much an environmentalist, but I'm more pragmatist. I think that's something that's important for us. It's important for our survival, both as a community and as a species. So we should be paying more attention to it and trying to do the things that protect the.
Okay, a couple of quick things that occurred to me as you were answering other questions. And I want to use you and learn as much from you as possible while you're here. What are you doing about trash?
Unfortunately, we have lots of trash. We have a municipal contract that's managed through the DPW, separate recyclable and trash bins. The contract we have the provider provides every home with a trash bin and a recyclable bin, and they come through the town, they pick them up on a schedule every week. We haven't had the issue of, having to install a trash fee or anything like that yet. There are more and more communities that are going that way. It kind of ebbs and flows. About 10 or 12 years ago, there was a big push for a lot of that kind of adoption. It kind of, that started to go away. Now I see the city of Lynn is proposing it, and the city of Lynn's going to go forward with one.
Right now, it's a service provided by.
Right now, it's a service provided by Winthrop.
Did you know Jay Ash when he was over in Chelsea?
So, you all can blame Jay Ash for me being here today. Jay and I are both Chelsea guys. My first role in government ever, anywhere, was on the Economic Development Committee for the city of Chelsea when Jay Ash was the Planning and Development Director for the city of Chelsea.
So you know Jay.
Yes, Jay recruited me to the committee.
Did you ever work with Richie Oak?
I know Richie. I didn't, I'm a little younger, so I didn't work with Richie, but I know Richie.
You mentioned state government, the fact that you had some good relationships with them. We have a minority leader of the Senate, and long-term Republican representative. How do you see yourself working with our delegation?
I've always worked well with all the folks in the State House. That'd be Mr. Tassay, Senate Minority Leader, is Bruce Tarr.
Yes, Bruce
Tarr. I know Bruce from my time at MAPC a little bit. We're not buddies. We don't call each other or anything. But I know Mr. Tarr, Senator Tarr. I think that they're good people. I think that they're interested in the same things that I'd be interested in as your town manager, and that's in improving and protecting the life of the folks in your town. So I think that we'd work very well together. Just because they're Republicans doesn't mean I won't get along with them. I'm actually an unenrolled voter myself. I don't have, a party side, so I believe in good government, so.
Okay, and for reasons that won't mean anything to you, what's your attitude toward trees and municipal planting for trees and beautification within Winthrop?
In Winthrop, we have a tree farm. We try to plant a certain number of trees every year when possible. We have a program that allows people to buy a tree and plant it in memory of somebody, or just to do it as a goodwill gesture. So we're big fans of trees in Winthrop. Winthrop was a tree city for a number of years. I don't know if we've kept that designation or not, but I know that somebody had gone out and done the work to show how good a job we were doing, both taking care of the trees we had and planting new ones, so we became Tree City. I think that, I saw a lot of trees that unfortunately fell down here on my drive up today, so, but you have a lot of trees, and I think that you probably look to replace certain trees.
I think we're going to be doing a lot more of that. Our ash trees are under a lot of pressure right now. Just in general, there are those who feel the canopy has been a part of the character of Ipswich, and probably going to be a more pronounced problem over the course of time. Thank you. That's right.
Thanks. I had a couple questions just to sort of level set me on some of your experience and where you might be, so that they might not be related.
Okay.
But they're not difficult, and you'll know the answer. So, as far as utilities, so it sounds like Winthrop buys their power, you're a national grid community.
Right.
Does Winthrop have a municipal water or sewer department that's managed by Winthrop?
We have
It's
a water
MWRA.
water sewer enterprise fund. We manage the pipes, but we get our water from water and provide our sewer through MWRA.
Okay.
So we're an MWRA committee.
Okay. What's your role, if any, in hiring and firing people at Winthrop?
Well, I mean, it depends on the department, but I mean, I've had a role in hiring and firing people. I hired our energy manager, I manage him, and I manage his work. I've helped with the hiring of our library director. I've helped with personnel issues on a number of different fronts, and particularly in the smaller departments. Our larger departments have, a little bit more built out infrastructure, organizational infrastructure.
Let me try it a different way. So is there an HR director in Winthrop?
There is an HR director who I work with.
Is he or she responsible for hiring and firing people?
She's not responsible for hiring or firing people. She's responsible for, administrating the direction of the town manager or the town manager's office. So I've been involved in collective bargaining and hiring and discipline through the HR director. She helps us manage the situation.
So who is responsible for hiring and firing? The
Town managers.
Town manager, okay. It's the same, I'll give you the background. I'll tell you why I'm asking. Under the charter in Ipswich, it's the same thing.
Yep.
What's evolved over the last decade is we have an HR director that is a relatively new position as far as the town that's several hundred years old goes. But it's the manager's responsibility.
Right.
In the charter.
Yeah, that's the same thing in Winthrop. It's the manager's responsibility for hiring and firing.
Okay. How familiar are you with our charter? Have you had a chance to read it?
I haven't read all of it, but I've read most of what pertains to the Board of Selectmen, the town meeting, Finance Commission, and the town manager's office.
So we're discussing potentially over the next year
Right.
making changes to the charter, specifically around the town manager. Do you see things in the charter or are you aware of that discussion at all? Do you see anything yourself first in the charter that you say, okay, that's pretty interesting. That I could take or leave that responsibility as a manager.
No, I mean, I thought I'd done a lot of good homework. I didn't realize you were considering changes to the charter. I thought the charter's a pretty strong town manager form of government, but as I've said before, I'm a collaborative leader. I'm the type of person that works with people, so I'm not worried about that aspect of things so much. I'd certainly want to work with the charter committee and understand the reasons for different changes that they wanted to make and make sure that we could accommodate their end result, whatever it is.
Okay, just to allay any fears my comment may have caused. When I say we're considering, we've discussed it sort of informally in this group, and it's this selectman's opinion that it wouldn't be a wholesale change. I don't think after those changes anyone would say, oh, they went to they completely went to a different form of weak town manager government at all. So for whatever that's worth in your decision, if you're offered the job, it shouldn't be, in my opinion, it shouldn't be a factor.
Not a concern for me anyway.
Just one other.
You've heard from one of the most substantial advocates for looking at it. I want you to know that.
One other question. So, give yourself a minute. Do you have a question for all of us or one of us? I mean, do you have a question for us?
Can we, we're almost done. What I'm wondering is, can I ask one more question, then go back to that?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll surrender the
And-
floor to
yes.
Mr.
Chairman of the screening committee, you can definitely do
Is
that.
that okay?
Yes.
And Nishan, you're raising your hand, so what were you going to say?
I just wanted to follow a question on.
Yeah, okay.
Something that's nothing to do with
Okay.
process, but more about the, so more about the, working with the department heads and getting to know them. I think it's a combination of the first question you had and this one. So, your first 30 days here, are you reaching out to former town manager to try to get an idea of her opinion of the department heads, or are you going to try to make your own determinations by your own interviews?
Interesting question. In full disclosure, I spoke to Bob Markle before I even got here for the first interview. I do believe in reaching back to people who've had experience and just hearing what they have to say and hearing their thoughts. I haven't spoken to Robin. I probably would, but that wouldn't necessarily be the main or overbearing part of any conversation I have. As I've said a couple times, I think, I'm a very big believer in relationships. And relationships are between people. You bring with you into the relationship all of your experiences and your expectations. So just because one person has one set of opinions or impressions of somebody or some department doesn't mean I will necessarily have that same set of impressions. I would use conversations like that to get information, but I would make my decision based on my interaction with those people. So I might reach out to Robin if she was open to it, but I wouldn't necessarily, base all of my thoughts and plans around what she would have to say. I definitely go into it very much open-minded. Just as I came into these interviews open-minded, I spoke to Barb for several minutes. I knew Bob from my time at MAPC, and I felt comfortable asking him his thoughts. He was very open, and it was, so far, I feel like it's been helpful. But again, I entered the conversation with my eyes open and my mind open.
Okay, I think, so I got one more question for you, and then we'll go back to Ed's final question, and if someone else has anything else. So we asked these in our initial interviews, and I think people looked at them as kind of a trick question, but they're not, and this isn't a gotcha question, but we have a board of selectmen. We're elected, and in this current board, all of us work full-time, other jobs, but we're responsible for hiring you, and according to the charter, you sort of, answer to us, I guess, maybe is how we'll phrase it. Yet you, in my mind, kind of run the town. You would be responsible for all the town employees, and you are full-time here.
Yep.
Yet we have to work together very closely. Explain to us how do you balance that? What happens when the board, what if we're going too slow, What if we're not really focused? What if we run into issues? How do you balance that? How do you envision your relationship with the Board of Selectmen?
So how do I manage up as opposed to managing down?
Well, I think you got to do both somehow, right? So,
You do. You absolutely do. And it's going to sound like a stock answer, but it goes back to relationships. I would try to do the same types of things with you all that I would do with the department heads. I would sit down with you at the beginning of the year and set goals for us. What is it that we want to accomplish in this next year? For Ed, it's going to be to review my job's performance and figure out what it is that we need to work on and set some milestones for ourselves. I understand you all have full-time lives. I mean, I certainly understand the balance of trying to juggle a full-time career and responsibilities at home and responsibilities on committees that you volunteer to serve on. So my role is to make sure you have all the information that you need. My role is to give you the tools to make the decision. It's your job to make the decision. Understanding that at the end of the day, we still are trying to accomplish an agreed-upon set of goals. And I'll keep pushing us to get there. It'll be different with each of you, right? Because you're 5 different people. You have 5 different personalities, and you respond to different things. So I'll be working with you each based on what it is that you can do, what it is you need, what it is you need from me. Again, this is about relationships because it affects people, so it has to be about relationships.
great. Okay, everyone else is kind of quietly looking at me. So I guess the question that we have then is do you have any other questions for us? And I guess to just go ahead. Do you have any questions for us?
And why don't you field them, and then you could say, you know what, what doesn't Linda answer that? If
Right.
there is a
Yep,
question,
sure.
why don't you be the referee?
Okay.
And figure out if
All right.
either you answer it or somebody else
Okay.
answers it.
Well, I didn't have a lot of questions. If I get the job, I'd have a lot of questions. I guess I would like to understand, what the thoughts around modifications to the charter are, not from a protective or defensive standpoint. I'm just intellectually curious. You have a pretty good form of government. It seems to be working, but obviously things can always be tweaked, and I'm actually an advocate for reviewing a charter every so many years to make sure that, it keeps up with changes. So I'd be interested in what kinds of changes you folks are interested in making, or if it's just Ed.
Go ahead,
So,
Mr.
let me
Rascher.
first say, we've, as I mentioned earlier, some of these are just ideas that several boards over the last 5 years have talked about. So we have not voted on any one thing, nor would I suggest at all that we're of one mind. But broadly speaking,
And several unsuccessful candidates.
broadly speaking, some of the changes might be around, they could be around utilities. Right now, the utilities pay a portion of the manager's salary.
Okay.
We might decide that's probably, we're not getting, from this selectman standpoint, I don't think we get the value. And I think it's grown over 15 years, more and more and more, where the managers that have been here have been less and less interested and involved in utilities. So there's been sort of an inverse happening with the money that's coming in here from, I point down there because that's where the electric light department is. So we say the money's coming downtown from there where the managers have been less engaged. So maybe we don't need the manager to be engaged because we have professional staff there that are engaged. So that's one area that in the charter, there's some responsibility for the manager with utilities, and it might not be necessary. To me, that's relatively low-hanging fruit. It's probably pretty easy. There are other areas where managers' appointing responsibility is an area that we might augment a little bit. The manager appoints the Conservation Commission. We might want to say, well, maybe the manager appoints 3 of the members and the board appoints 3 of the members, or maybe those appointments have to get confirmed by the Board of Selectmen. So there are some appointing things that we might, on the margins, augment, I think, a little bit. And then there are some responsibilities, I got to one, that some of us feel are really important for the manager to own around staffing, hiring and firing. I don't think, I would want to make sure that somehow, whether it's in the charter or somewhere else, that we codify, we want the manager to be directly involved and to own the staffing and staff development and that sort of thing. And that the HR department it serves a function, but it's not taking over the manager's responsibility in hiring and firing, which our current charter allows. It says may be delegated. So those are some of the areas around the charter, but I don't want to make this a charter discussion because, as I said, those are sort of the 4 corners of the types of things we would change. Some that probably aren't necessary anymore vis-a-vis the manager, and there are other changes that we need to make in the charter, like getting rid of. There are some positions that don't even exist. They're not town manager related. The 3 examples I gave you were just specifically town manager related.
I appreciate the information.
You have any other questions?
I don't.
Okay.
With regard to the charter, we talked about this just as a board. There are some gender references that probably ought to be updated. So
Sure.
That's pretty straightforward.
That would be appropriate. Well, I appreciate you all having me in. It's been a pleasure getting to meet you and getting to know the town a little bit more, and I hope I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Very
Thanks
much.
for coming.
We've
Thank you.
appreciated your time, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Whitmore, your game.
All right, let's move forward with our second interview. This would be Mr. Anthony Marino, who is currently the acting town manager in Hanover.
Tony's fine, thank you.
Tony, good to meet you again.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, so the way that we've been working this, Tony, is that we've just been kind of going down the line, each kind of picking a question, or we have a list here, but we've also been making up our own questions as we go.
Sure.
So if you could just, we had a little bit of feedback issues earlier, so just if you, no, move it, I think we fixed it, but move the mic closer to you so it can be.
I'm familiar with these mics, no
So
problem.
the closer the better.
Sure.
And do you guys want to do the same thing? Nishan, you want to start?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, why will it do that?
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for making the time to come over here this morning. Everything good down in Linfield?
I wasn't in Linfield last night. I was in Hanover last night. Did not make it home. I was in Hanover all night. I came up from there this morning. Had to scrambled to get my suit together, but it was good. It was about the same as here. Most of the town was without power. A lot of trees, down trees, things like that. Not a coastal town, but we had some about 60, 70 mile an hour wind gusts down there. So, well, lots of phone calls on the way up, dealing with setting up warming centers and shelters and things like that. So, onward and upward.
That's it, just, I think we're all past the hard part.
Yes.
Back to normalcy, right?
Yes.
So, we had an opportunity to look over your resume and your work history. So if you don't mind, Tony, if you could just spend a couple minutes just telling us about yourself and, you know, why you're interested in coming up to beautiful Ipswich and, you know, what you feel your qualifications are, your qualifications for this.
Sure. I started in Hanover back in 2008. I was actually hired as the building commissioner first. Sort of right place, right. I was a self-employed builder before that for numerous years. And thank you. And the opportunity came up in Hanover. I took it, and sort of right place, right time. They were in the process of switching from a town administrator to a town manager form of government. And at that point, I was made the director of municipal inspections, and then ultimately the director of community services, which was one of the 6 major department heads for the town. They quickly realized that that job was an assistant town manager job, and then that title came along with that job as well. I get into this, and I wasn't sure if I was going to like it or not. I was, self-employed, came from the business world, but I actually found I love being a public servant. Sort of found my calling late in life. I was a very good builder, but I never really loved it. But I found, so I love being a public servant. I loved helping people. That's really what got me into this business. I've worked my way up. I already had my bachelor's degree, so I realized for this position I would need my master's. So I recently finished up my MBA. With a concentration in public administration. The opportunity presented itself. They made me the acting town manager in November. I've been doing the job since then. Just finished up our budget here for our GFOA submission, and we're moving forward. So I feel like my life changes have sort of changed. I'm getting married on April 6th, and my fiance is from Linfield. And as I stated, it's actually Saugus, but we live in Linfield now. And you can't, Italian mother-in-law, you're not going to move more than 5 or 10 miles away. So. Got to be up on the North Shore now, so I'm a South Shore guy coming north. So my future's up here, and the commute to Hanover just doesn't work. So other than that, I've been in Hanover for 10 years, and I have another 20 years to work, and I hope it's in Ipswich.
So, good morning again. Ipswich, we're looking for a strong leader and a problem solver who's going to help us share a combined vision. How do you see yourself helping us to do that?
Well, my goal as a town manager is to support the Board of Selectmen and, be there for the residents and the department heads and the employees. I feel my job is to make sure that all of the department heads have the tools they need to do the job, and also to do strategic planning with the Board of Selectmen and make sure that the vision of this board and the residents of the town is met. I do this in Hanover now. I actually brought a sample if they want to look at it, but one of my initiatives in Hanover was economic development. And we actually created back in 2015-16 an economic development plan that we mailed out to over 100 national and local businesses. We actually got 10 to 15 responses, and ultimately 3 of those businesses now are in the planning board stages and going through to open businesses in Hanover. I spearheaded that project, so I feel like supporting the town and the visions. Ipswich is a nice town because it's still got the historical center, and we have to maintain that and maintain the community feel here, but also you need economic development. So there's going to be that balance that many communities up here are striving for, because sustainable government is really where we're all striving for, and can't keep taxing our way out of it. So we need to find ways to get new growth and keep the budget in line to move the town forward.
Okay.
In terms of the way you operate your management style, can you give us a little sense of that, of how you work with, well, actually, let's combine it, how you manage up, but probably more importantly for this question, how you manage down and how you hold people.
Sure. First thing I'll say is I'm not a micromanager. I believe in letting my department heads do the job we hired them to do. But my other thing is, as well, my goal is to never surprise the Board of Selectmen. I also don't want my department heads to surprise me. So if there are things going on in town that I need to know about, I need to, I expect them to let me know so I can, 1, inform the Board of Selectmen, and 2, just, we can start solving the problems. I have an open door policy. My staff can come in and out. I really find myself to be a sort of a kind and thoughtful leader. I want to invest in my employees, make sure they succeed. I've actually had an experience where we took 3 of our employees out of the union and made them assistant conservation agents, assistant health agents, and assistant planners. And we actually did some career growth with them and invested in them. And it actually panned out because recently, based on changes in the government, we were able to move 2 of those employees up to take the positions of conservation agent and health agent. And now we're looking to, deepen the pool.
That open up discussions with the unions?
It did in the beginning, yes. But the union, once we explained to them that these were coming out, were no longer clerical positions, that they were going to actually have some minimal supervisory responsibility, but also inspectional responsibility, the union didn't give us a lot of pushback on that.
So you found just by communication and information, that was enough to satisfy the...
When I do anything, it's always collaboratively. I mean, reaching out, educating people, talking to people is always the way to get things done. I mean, it took a little bit of time, probably 3 or 4 months before we got it finalized, but we did it right around the time we were negotiating a new contract, so it worked out.
Related to your management style, you just finished your MBA.
Correct.
What are the 2 things that you learned through that program that have been helpful?
Well, the first was I realized I was doing PowerPoint all wrong. Yeah, I got yelled at a lot for that. We tend to, in municipal government, put a lot of information on slides, but that's not how you're supposed to use that at the professional level. So, and second off, we just really, at the master's level, it's all about writing and putting your ideas and your thoughts together. So being able to take an idea that I had for a public-private partnership for senior housing, which was my master's thesis, and actually work that from start to finish, doing the research, finalizing the plan, and then actually having an action plan to follow up with afterwards was really something I hadn't done before, so that was really good.
And being able to explain it in 1 page and a half.
Correct. The summary, and then actually being able to present it with a PowerPoint slide that, was more in line with today's thinking.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Tony, thanks for taking some time to come out and see us today.
Pleasure to be here.
Especially after such a long night in Hanover.
Yes, it was not a lot of sleep last night, but that's all right.
Did you get a coffee on the way up?
No, because there's no power in Ipswich right now.
Right. Yeah. All right. So you didn't need the
I
coffee.
made the mistake of not stopping on my way
You
up
didn't need
Route
the
1.
coffee on the drive
Yeah.
up. That's clear. One of the ways to think about sort of the any new manager job is the idea of the 30, 60, 90. What do you want? What are your priorities going to be? So I'd ask you to think about the question both in terms of let's say you just landed as a manager in Acme Inc. Forget whether it's a town of Ipswich. What should be or what would be your top 30, 60, 90 priorities? But then so answer that question and then say, but in Ipswich that looks like this. I mean, these priorities in the first 30, 60, 90 might be like this in Ipswich.
Sure. First 30 days is any business or thing is always sort of what I call the honeymoon period. You're getting to know everybody. You're working your way through meeting the department heads, having probably lots of meetings in the initial stages with not only the staff, but some of the important boards and committees in towns, planning board, board of health, things like that. And that'll continue into the 60 days. So I would say the 30 and 60 would be just more of that. 90 days is really where you're going to start to set the stage for understanding what the goals of the Board of Selectmen are and start to talk about strategic planning sessions, in my mind, and thinking about when we may start doing that. And that's just sort of the generic one. But specifically in Ipswich, I'd want to come in and understand, what's going on with the school project, that's ongoing, and where that stands as far as town meeting approval and probably ultimately a ballot vote. And obviously understand the needs of the economic development. I know there's an economic development plan that was finished up last year, and it looks like there's a marketing plan for this year. I'd want to, see where that stands and see if I could be of assistance in there. And then obviously talking about the coastal concerns here, getting myself up to speed with, what's going on. Obviously, coastal erosion, flooding, all of those things are a concern. But what we can do, and basically supporting an already great team that you have here and finding out how I can help to enhance that and go out and look for possible grant monies and things like that. One of the things we've been successful with in Hanover is when we have storms like this, and we did it last night, is we would set up strike teams. So I'd look to try to see what the setup is here. We'd send out one police piece of equipment, one fire equipment, and then one DPW piece of equipment, and set them up as 4 strike teams. And then they could go any situation they went into, whether it was a down tree or power line, you'd have all those pieces of equipment available to deal with any issue, stopping traffic, fire, or whatever that came up. So we've been successful doing that. So I'd want to find out what they're doing, and they may already be doing that here, and great, or may even have a better plan. So, but I want to find out how I can support them and work with the team that's already in place here, doing a great job.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning again.
Morning.
You mentioned a term that resonates for me, which is sustainable government.
Yes.
And tell me a little bit more about that, and specifically, give me some examples or thoughts that you have for where you currently are, and then what would sustainable government mean here in Ipswich?
Sure. When you say where I currently am in Hanover, or? Oh, sure. In Hanover right now, it's actually a very similar community to Ipswich without the coastline as far as regard to size of government, size of budget, and whatnot. Almost in a very similar free cash number within $500,000 or $600,000. So I would say, taking a sustainable government means, we're going to have to look at all of our OPEB liabilities. We're going to have to look at health insurance costs, things like that, what we can control on our end. The other part of that equation is you can't just focus on the, cutting budgets. You also have to focus on new growth. Where can we grow the town, but also maintain the historic character of the town so we don't infringe on that. But there are definitely going to be opportunities out there for economic development. I just read through, your report, and obviously there's been a few areas that highlighted, but there's going to be probably more that'll come down the pike. So that's going to be another part of it. But the problem is, and we talk about this among managers down in the South Shore, and we'll do that up here as well, is, you can't keep taxing your way out of it. There's pushback from the residents. We get it in Hanover all the time. Seniors can't afford to live in town. They have got their big house, but they can't afford the tax bill. So, we need to, part of that equation could be trying to find some legislation that would allow us to maybe either freeze a senior's tax rate, so they could, almost like a reverse mortgage, the taxes would still build up, but they would only pay what they're paying now, so they could afford to stay in their homes, or look for creative ways to cluster zoning and things like that to possibly create some affordable senior housing, or even starter homes for families, to try to get a little bit more, in areas where it's appropriate, to try to diversify the housing stock a little bit. And that's really the way. And here in Ipswich, I think it's going to be the same. It looks like a very similar community. You've got a big agricultural component. You've got the coastline. You've got your historic district. I would think a lot of those same concerns that come up in Hanover are going to come up here as well. Maintaining the tax rate, but also trying to satisfy the public's, appetite for services. And I would say, we need to look for ways to streamline that. Like I said, cost savings with health insurance, things like that. But overall, I would say we need to look to probably some sort of regionalization. I think that's going to be in the future. I think everybody, especially with inspectional services and places like that, I think there's opportunities for that to maintain the same level of service, but hopefully at least hold this cost steady where they are today without having to see them go up. So I think those are some areas I'd focus on.
Okay, as a quick follow-up, or maybe not quick follow-up, what, as far as sustainable government or our budget, is there anywhere that Ipswich could improve? When you look at what we're doing, where can we be better?
It was a pretty solid budget. It's very similar to Hanover's, so I wouldn't want to knock my own budget, but I think we can all do better on free cash. I think understanding the need for free cash, I think you made the smart move in taking a look at Standard & Poor's versus Moody's to try to increase the bond rating. That's something I'm looking to do in Hanover, so I thought that was a move in the right direction. Like I said, we've got slightly higher free cash in Hanover, so I think, taking a conservative budget approach with regard to revenues and turnbacks and making sure we build up that free cash number to allow us to have that for capital purchases. I think in a perfect world, you wouldn't rely on free cash for the budget and just use free cash for capital purchases and have the budget be sustainable that way. So I think that's something we could work towards.
Okay, thanks.
Tony, one of the questions I have has to do with, so you've been assistant town manager and acting town manager in Hanover since '08, I think, right?
A little later with the assistant town manager.
Right,
Yes.
but-
I've been in here 10 years, probably 7 or so with the assistant.
So, one of the things that kind of gets me going a little bit is when someone comes in new to a community and the community's always been doing things the way they've always been doing them. And now, new set of eyes, you come in and you're looking at them and say, boy, do you have the confidence and the strength to say, just because you've been doing it this way for the last 110 years, doesn't mean it's the
right way of doing it, maybe you should look at doing it this way. And just because the prior town managers were doing it this way, I think or if there's something that the board of selectmen might not even be aware of, and I'll give you an example. Stipends. Stipends was not on our radar. And it's now on our radar for good reasons, and it was, the answer that we got was, well, it's always been the way you guys have been doing it. So as opposed to, if you saw that and say, listen, you guys know that you're doing this, and maybe there's another way of doing it, so would you have the confidence and the strength to come to the board and say, this is what's going on here, rightly or wrongly, I think there's a better way of doing this?
Yes, the answer to that simple question is absolutely. I've done that my whole career. I tend to be an outside-the-box thinker, and I love bringing new ideas forward. People may not always like them, but I'm certainly going to be, there'll be no shortage of them. With regard to stipends, in particular, I can say we've had that same issue in Hanover about 4 years ago, which we've now taken care of. I think there's only one stipend left being paid out, so we were able to actually do a compensation study, take a look at salaries, and realize where we needed people to be at, and rolled all those stipends in and actually made salary adjustments to those people, so we're able to get rid of the stipends. We're in the process now. I was actively involved with what a TIF, the tax increment financing plan that we recently did for one of our commercial developers. We brought that forward. That met some resistance, from the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee Advisory Committee, but we were able to get through that process by having lots of meetings, to making a collaborative process and educating the town as to the benefits of the TIF and really get into the nuts and bolts and see where the benefit to the town was. We were holding the value of the mall at a certain level and really only giving tax breaks on any new growth that they were, going to be bringing into the town and ultimately increasing our tax revenue. So yeah, you won't have any shortage. I always joke and say I've got a entrepreneurial spirit with a public servant heart. So but you're always going to see me thinking outside the box. One thing I never take from my employees, and I always write it down, is I don't ever want to hear, well, that's how we've always done it. And we may continue to do it that way, but we're going to see if we can look to make it better and create more efficient ways to do it. And anything I look to change is only going to be to what I feel to help Ipswich and create efficiencies for the town to save money. It's not going to be to come in and change just for the sake of change. It's going to be change to run things more smoothly.
So shellfishing in Ipswich is a major industry. It's been around here for probably as long as the town's been here. So there's a lot of concern with environmental protection, protecting our coastline, climate change, sustainability, green communities. What programs have you been involved in?
Sure. Hanover's been a green community now for the past 8 years. We're actually one of the leaders in the state for green communities money. We get in on average $250,000 to $300,000 a year from green communities. I was actively involved in that in the beginning, obviously due to the stretch energy code and home building and things like that. But then, now as the assistant town manager and the acting town manager, I'm intimately involved with our facilities manager and making sure that those programs are not only in line, but making sure that we're hitting the targets that we have to keep getting that green communities money. As far as environmental whatnot goes, coastline, I have some experience as I used to manage property on the coastline and dealt with the issues that have impacted people with that, with regard to flooding and things like that. But with regard to cleanups and whatnot and actually protecting the environment, I'm actively involved now we have what's called the fireworks site, which was MIT, Tronics, and the Department of Defense were down there using the South Shore as a testing ground for munitions back during World War II. So they left that all behind, and now we're in the process of working with DEP and a company called Tetra Tech to get that cleaned up. It's going to be about a 5-year cleanup. Monthly calls now with DEP and the Attorney General's office to make sure that that's getting cleaned up to what we want it to be, a passive recreation level, and there's no more munitions. But the problem is we find we have many loud munitions, and we have to deal with the residents with regard to daily explosions and sirens and whatnot going off, and we have the State Police Bomb Squad down there doing daily detonations. So we didn't know, but we had buried munitions out there for years. But I've got I certainly have the experience not only with the state. I've got business, economic development office, DEP. I've got all those connections up there. I've got I look to make a relationship with your state rep here, and everybody else. But I just I feel like I'll be able to get it intimately involved with all of the coastal erosion problems, protecting the environment, any sort of caps you want to put on shellfishing and things like that, and be able to help with the work that's already going on in town.
So how about solar and windmills, and do you have
Yes, I have plenty of experience with that. We had a windmill that went up in town. We did one. Seems like all windmills seem to have problems. We had them in Hanover. We had a contractor that put it in that was, low bidder, and ended up going out of business. So we were chasing our own tail to try to get the instruction manual and how to get it up and running. We finally found a local company to come in and do that, but that was about a 2-year process to get that up and running. But the good news is it's up and running now and generating power. Hanover is actively involved in solar. We've got quite a few, we do solar on a lot of our buildings. We also have, with the being a green community town and the energy credits they get for it, a lot of our businesses have it. And in fact, we actually turned that around, and that was sort of the contributing factor. Solar was to end up helping us get a large fire grant, almost $980,000 towards a new ladder truck. Because we were able to point out the fact that with all the solar panels on the roofs now, it creates a hazard for our fire department, and having the ladder truck that we had didn't make sense, so we were able to get a bucket truck that we now utilize for that, because, it's all great, solar panels are great, but if you're not thinking, like, if there's a fire in the building, or even if you shut those panels down, they're still generating electricity. Even with moonlight, they're still generating electricity, so it creates a hazard for our fire department. So we were working that out. So solar's great. I think it's probably the cleaner way to go, but we're also now looking at our capped landfill for solar projects and things like that. So, and the other thing we did is the net metering credits. We were able to sign up 4 projects in town. Some of those have finished up now, but there's supposed to be another round coming out, and that's going to save us upwards of about $30,000 a year on our utility bills.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your economic development plan, as apparently you've got a copy with you?
I do.
With, in brief summary, what were the key points that you hit upon? I know one of the things that, in looking at the greater Boston area particularly, they claim that we have more millennials per capita than anyone else, and cities and towns and successive circles coming out from Boston are likely to have an opportunity to attract some of these folks.
Yes.
Have you seen any implications of generational shifts in your economic plan?
Right now, Hanover is where we have a larger senior population, but again, that's going to shift. So we'll eventually see more millennials coming to town. That's where we're at now. We've got a couple of large apartment builders that want to come into town and create, apartments. Luckily, we're already over 10% for affordable housing, so we don't have to deal with the 40Bs. We are for now, but as everybody knows, that's a moving target. So we're constantly looking to create affordable units to maintain that. We're actually at 11.7 right now. But again, we've got the Hanover Mall project I talked about, developers coming in to redo that, make it an open-air mall, similar to Linfield Marketplace and those kind of style malls. But part of those now are housing components. Having housing on the perimeter or on the property is a big part of the new retail component. People want to live, shop, and eat, and do all their activities right in one spot now. And that's really what a lot of the millennials are attracted to. So we're looking to do that at the mall, but obviously there's pushback in the community. So that we had to tie that in to make sure we educate them and get the proper numbers with regard to, who's going to come there, and is it really going to be, there's always the concern it's going to turn into a Section 8 housing, or it's going to be turned into a rundown apartment building, or it's going to be too many kids in our school system and increased fire and police calls and things like that. But that tends not to be the case with some of these newer apartment buildings now that really are 1 and 2 bedrooms only, and attract a lot of professionals that are going into the city and millennials. That's what they're finding, especially in the shopping plazas. So we're in the process now of sort of trying to educate the town, have a lot of public forums and meetings, and let them know what's going on with that, and make sure we get town support for that. So a lot of that was geared towards that, but also it was about selling Hanover, which is what I'd like to look to do here, is selling Ipswich, as far as talk about the good, talk about the demographics, the median income, the potential workforce, all of the amenities that the town has to offer, especially in Ipswich with the beaches and things like that, and to try to attract new businesses to come here, to talk about, how we a vibrant downtown and things like that, and really get them to come to town and, hit on all the highlights. And we were successful in doing that in Hanover, and I'd like to do that here.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Just to follow up to that one, so on economic development, what did you attract? What kinds of businesses want to be in downtown USA these days?
Sure. Well, part of it was we ended up getting that large mall developer from Ohio, Prep, Pico Investment Corp, came out, and they invested in the mall. One of the reasons they stated was after a meeting with myself and the town planner, they realized we had this open for business mentality. They really liked what they heard, and that was one of the reasons they put in a little bit higher bid on the mall. We were actually told that by them.
And there's the mall downtown?
The mall's right, actually, Hanover's lucky, there is not really no downtown, which I guess isn't lucky because everybody wants one. But our commercial corridor is all sort of on one side of the town, which has a highway exit.
Oh, okay.
So you get off the highway and it's one
Right.
stretch that we call Route 53 that's, so we're lucky that it's all on one side, and then the other half of the town is, the residential and the rural side.
So how do you replicate that kind of success where you were able to get economic development
Correct.
in a different town like us? So for us, it means downtown. So what do you do downtown Ipswich to get businesses? And
It's
what kind of businesses? What's appropriate to be in
Well, we'll
town?
see what the town can generate. I mean, some of the thoughts we've had in Hanover, and probably we would work up here, is, satellite college campuses. Some of the larger universities come in, if there's room to do those kind of businesses. Certainly increase the restaurant, number of restaurants you have downtown. Take a look to see if there's any opportunities. I mean, it looks like there's some housing above most of your, downtown area now, but look to see maybe there's ways to expand that, to increase the housing stock and attract those millennials that we talked about. But that all comes from relationship building, and that's going to take a little bit of time. I've been able to build relationships in Hanover for 10 years. I mean, there isn't a business owner in town that doesn't know me and can give me a call and say, how can we get this done? And ultimately, those relationships are what allowed me to, partner up businesses, potential business owners with, landowners, and we have 3 right now that are coming to town that are a direct result of that. We have a new private restaurant called Brothers Roast Beef that came to town and built a brand-new building with 2 additional retail sites, and then a large meat supplier called Previties and Fratelli's Bakery is going to but open a new location in town, and they're going to incorporate one of our historic buildings into there, which is something I was actively involved in, keep our historic barn and allow them to incorporate that into the project and then to build onto that.
Okay. I wanted to follow up on a question that Ms. Alexson asked about climate-related spending. So let me ask it this way. As it relates to the municipal budget, meaning the spending at the town level, what have you been involved in that way that would help reduce the carbon footprint of a town, be carbon neutral?
Sure.
Those sorts of efforts. Here in Ipswich, we have an electric utility department.
Right.
That's controlled by the commission. So that I'm not talking about things, putting solar panels on or hiring a contractor that's going to do it privately on people's homes. I'm talking about how do you solve for that problem in the municipal government?
Sure. I mean, we've done that in Hanover through, helping reduce the amount of power we draw. So we've converted all of our town-owned buildings now. We converted all the lights over to LED. We've used the green community monies for that. We were able to take those monies, convert all the lights over. We just finished the police and fire station. So that ultimately reduces our carbon footprint. And we have they still have a transfer station in town with a very active recycling program. My personal opinion is I find that single stream tends to work better, but now with the pushback on recycling and the numbers dropping off that you're getting back for recyclable products, that's going to be something we'll have to take a look at. And everybody will, because also there's been some pushback, I don't know if you guys know, on glass. Trying to get rid of glass now is very difficult.
We're confronting that too. But let me just challenge you for a second. Sure. So on the spending of the municipal government, is the Green Community Initiative, is that a local tax? Is that a local municipal government spend?
No, that's money we get, it's money we go after, through the local government adopted the green communities, which allows us to go after the green community funds. But we have to put town resources to it for admin and staff time to put that plan together, to come up with the programs, to come up with the ways to save money. All of our boilers now are switched over to energy efficient. Like I said, we did the windmill. Used town money to put the windmill up, and we also have spent town monies to put solar panels on all of our town-owned buildings.
And where's the power go for? Tell us about the windmill, the wind turbine deal. How does that work?
That went up right next to our water treatment plant. We have all well water in town, so we have 3 water treatment plants in town. But the primary one on Pond Street that the power goes right directly to feed into that. That facility.
Okay, so it's a way to reduce your cost, your draw from the national grid.
From National Grid.
Yeah. Okay. And who's responsible for that wind? Who is the responsible person in town for the wind?
Ultimately the town manager is responsible. So, but the DPW director was overseeing it as it was going up, and we hired a separate third-party engineer firm as our owner's project manager for the project. But ultimately, we had to let them go. They weren't doing a good job.
Right. Okay. Let's see. What can you tell me about just stay on that same theme, about this landfill? You mentioned you might cap a landfill with potentially, or have you done it, or I just?
Well, we already capped the landfill, and now we, at that location, we created a transfer station. So people come in, dump the trash into a big pit, it gets compacted, and then we haul it out.
I'm sorry, I was unclear. So you mentioned vis-à-vis a solar project,
Oh, yes, sorry.
where you are on that.
Well, yeah, we have a capped landfill. It's a large chunk of land that's also our transfer station, but the other half of it is a grass mound with the landfill. We've contracted, it's actually gonna go to town meeting, I believe this year. We're trying to get it on the warrant now. But we're gonna have a company coming in that's going, proposing to put solar panels on there, and they'll end up paying the town back a percentage of that, what they generate.
Right.
So it's gonna be a revenue generator for
All
us.
right, so it's going to happen. I mean, it's moving forward.
That's, yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And we're also looking at another parcel behind our senior center to clear and possibly put one there in the future as well.
Great, thanks, Tony.
You're welcome.
Okay, you've mentioned, I've heard bringing new ideas forward, I've heard selling Ipswich, and it's clear communication is important to you, but, what I'm trying to, I want to find some more specifics out on how exactly you've done that. So we have some controversial proposals here right now. We have a school proposal that's controversial. Right now we have discussions about expanding on a commuter rail parking lot and working with the state and EBSCO to do that. So we have some things that are really, people are kind of arguing back and forth on these. How do you, when it comes to communicating, how do you communicate those issues to the community? How do you communicate and bring those issues to the board of selectmen?
Yeah.
And how do you deal with those controversial topics?
Sure. Right now, currently, my interaction with the board is obviously emails almost, constantly, but weekly, I do a weekly report, which is a daily summary of events that happen within the town. Sort of just, bulleted items, not a lot of detail, but the board obviously can follow up with me at the next meeting and ask, more in-depth questions. But they sort of get a flavor of what's going on and new initiatives that are coming into town. With regard to specific, like the school project that you referred to and the back and forth, we had a similar project that we just approved about a year and a half ago that's now under construction in Hanover, and I was the eligible applicant for the project. And I was actively involved with the school building committee and the OPM in pushing forward the education on that. We did several TV shows. We had 3 or 4 public forums, all which the 3 of us were there, and we were answering the questions and dealing with the community's concerns about really how is it going to increase my tax bill? How much more is this going to cost? We had just recently built a high school in the last 6 or 7 years, and now we had an elementary school addition to the tune of $32 million, of which over half was going to be paid by MSBA, but still $16 million or so that had to go on the the Hanover's tax roll, debt. So I would say that's how I utilize that. So having those public forums, utilizing the local cable access, doing television shows that were broadcasted right up until the town meeting, really helped to sell that to the point where we got to town meeting and had a unanimous vote at town meeting, and then ultimately when they got to the polls, it was 80% approval on that project. So that specifically, I was one of the front people on that, and now that project is moving along excellent with our OPM, and we're under budget and on target for time to get the project done. With regard to second one, to be a parking lot expansion, I would sort of compare that to, I guess where's the land going to be for that parking lot expansion, if you don't mind me asking? Is that right on site or an additional off-site?
It's on site.
Okay.
It's a current parking lot, but there's a
That's
proposal.
down where the train stop is now?
Yes, and there's a
Okay.
proposal to kind of expand it up and include housing.
Okay. That proposal coming in as a 40B, or is that a private market rate? Or is it just
We don't know.
We don't know, it's
don't know
all
yet?
preliminary, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's,
Well, depending upon what the board wanted, obviously I'd get the flavor of the board, see if that's something the town wants to support, and if it is, then if it's an initiative the town wants to support, then we'd certainly start the education process. Again, public forums, get the public involved, find out the concerns early on, so we can try to address them and maybe work them into the project. Maybe there's something that can be done to modify the project to address the concerns, give it the historical look that maybe they want in that part of town. Do something with the architecture, actively work with the planning board. Do you guys have a design review committee in town?
not for that particular property. It would be the planning board probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a separate design review committee that sort of takes a look at
Yeah,
the
we do
plans for,
Yeah, we have one.
outside of
I
that.
don't think it probably wouldn't apply for that project.
Depend on what it looks
Yeah.
yeah. So again, work with that to try to incorporate maybe some of the concerns that residents might have with regard to, a big, large structure being struck up right in the middle of town, and that. But then also, point out the benefits of it. The increased parking means more people are going to be coming to town and using the train stop, and then obviously the apartments are going to increase the tax, the tax base for the town and increase the number of people that could be shopping, eating, and living in the center of town as well.
Yep, okay, and just a quick follow-up. So I kind of, brought up specific issues and things that were that we're dealing with controversial here, but how do you, just in general, how do you build faith and trust in town government?
By providing excellent customer service and doing what you say you're going to do. I've done that in Hanover since I got there. Like I said, that whole open for business mentality in my mind started with me back when I got there in 2008. It was one of the reasons I got into this. I dealt with somewhere along the line, town government forgot they're supposed to be there to educate and help people, in my opinion. And I believe that that's something that I bring to the town. Making the residents' concerns a top priority, making sure we listen to them, hear their concerns, and, deal with them as quickly and efficiently as we can.
Okay.
Are we going back this side? Sorry.
Yeah, go that way.
Way down here again. So, getting on, kind of staying on the subject about the school building and the schools in particular. So, you've been, again, acting town manager and assistant town manager in Hanover for a while. I'm not sure what the ratio to school budget is to town budget in Hanover, but ours is about a 65-35 to the school, plus or minus.
It's about the same.
Okay, so how was your relationship with the superintendent and with the school committee and school boards in particular?
My relationship's excellent. It has been since I arrived there. I've been through 2 school superintendents now, one retired, and we've had a new one come in a few years ago. We've always had an open relationship with them. Like you said, those weekly meetings that go on with the department heads, they probably go on bi-weekly with the school superintendent. So we're constantly aware of what's going on with the school budget, any sort of new initiatives they're bringing down the pike. And we're actually recently started discussions about coming up with a 5 or 10 year, not really capital plan for the schools because that's tied into facilities, but sort of education initiative plan. Like what's coming down the pike for the schools so we can try to plan for it and sort of time it out with, the needs, the other needs in the town with regard to, police, fire, DPW, and things like that. So I would have an excellent relationship with the schools and the school committee as well. Like I said, I've been around 10 years. I know most of them. And actually, one of the members of the school building committee also sits on the school committee, is an active participant there. And, we have a great relationship since we, did the project together. So I'd look to build those same relationships here. Outreach, communication, and, like you said, they're one of the largest parts of the budget, so we have to be actively involved with them.
Even human resources or payroll, does your municipal office and the school office share those services now? And how would we look in Ipswich to be doing more of that?
Sure. I've been through that process in the beginning. We started with townwide facilities, where we took all of the responsibilities for the school buildings away from the schools. And we also took the custodians away at the same time and created a facilities department and then rolled those workers into the DPW budget. So we have a separate segment of the DPW budget that includes the facilities workers. We realized we did maintenance better on the buildings, so we took that over, and it's actually worked out great. We've actually, the school superintendent came out a couple years ago and said the buildings have never looked as well as they do now with regard to maintenance, cleanliness, and upkeep. And we've been able to do that within the budget that we have set and not, making a capital plan and taking care of the projects as they come down the pike without any major issues. The second, what that spawned off of that was we reached out and we realized ultimately that the school did technology better than we did on the town side. So we created a townwide technology department that we let the school department take the lead on. So now they take care of all of the town-owned buildings, and we took the money and funded it into that, and that's actually worked out great. And on the payroll and benefits side, we did the same thing. We took the payroll and benefits offices runs out of the school administration building, and they take care of all of the payroll and benefits for the town. And while we don't have an HR director yet, that's another initiative coming down the pike that it's been identified as a need. So I think ultimately you'll see that, and I think that'll be some sort of a combination with that office as well. So the relationships that we forged have allowed us to create those departments and create the efficiencies with them and not be duplicating efforts on both ends.
Great, thanks.
Could I just ask a quick follow-up question?
Sure.
On the payroll side, Tony, do you guys do payroll in-house, or do you use outside?
We do we use a program called SoftWrite, and then we, for check processing and payroll data entry, we use Harper's. So we use an outside third-party vendor for that.
All set?
Actually, just a quick question on the payroll. I assume that's because the schools have a majority of the personnel, so that they presumably are smart on that subject. Is that how that happened?
Correct. I wouldn't say they're any smarter than us on that topic, but they certainly are the higher percentage. But no, yeah, they had it down to a science, and we sort of, rather than duplicating effort, they'd be doing it all and then bringing it over to us, and then we'd be entering it again. It was a cumbersome process that needed to be streamlined. So we took a look at it and created this one-stop shopping.
I'm also fascinated by budgets, and you indicated that free cash was something that needed to be managed and understood.
Yes.
And in part, you consciously worked to create free cash so that it was available for non-operational expenses.
Correct.
Now, when the residents come before you and say, that's our money, you're just taking it from us now, and we don't know how you're going to spend it, how do you respond to that?
I would say, look at free cash like a savings account. You know, you're taking money and you're setting it aside for future capital expenditures. And it's really just money you save throughout the year to be able to fund the needs, so we don't have to increase, hopefully beyond the 2.5, or have any sort of operational overrides or even educational overrides in the future. And if we were able to manage that free cash, we're able to stay within the 2.5 and not, have any overrides. So that's how I would sell it.
Really the standard. If that's what is permitted, then what we try to do is manage each year within what we are permitted, knowing that some of that will be savings and some of it will be spent during the course of that year.
Yes.
But rather than having to exceed that at any given time, by managing this savings account, we are able to manage always under the 2.5.
Correct.
Okay, so
That's the goal, yeah.
Could I just ask a follow-up on that specific question? So can you tell us how that's worked out for you? So what you're telling us is every year you build a 2.5 budget.
Correct.
At the end of the year, give us something, just tell us how that works out.
Sure, we have,
Free cash,
on average, we have about 800,000 or so in turnbacks. And then we really take the time to go through and take a look at our revenues, our receipts for the town, building permit fees, et cetera, we go through line item by line item. And we try to keep it between 75 and 80% of really where we think they're gonna be, because anything you take in over that number is gonna be certified as free cash at the end of the year. So that, we manage that list as well. And that's really what we've been able to do. I mean, when I started in Hanover, they were using upwards of $1 to $1.5 million in free cash a year. We've actually got that number down now. We're not completely off of it, but this year we'll budget about $500,000 in free cash to use for the operating budget. So it's a steady process, and we certified last year $2.9 million in free cash, of which, we try to not exceed using 75% of that in any given year. So we always maintain a balance that rolls over to the next year.
So did you say that on average, you have roughly about $800,000 in municipal turnbacks every year?
Yes.
So $800,000 in money that wasn't spent in the municipal budget every year?
Correct. And then that rolls into the free cash number.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, so in fact, you are raising more money than you plan to expend during that year, staying under the 2.5.
Correct.
But you have good communications, transparency, and a great story that goes along with doing that.
Without a doubt.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's really what you need, because you have to explain the budget as a whole. It's not just, what we're taxing and what we're spending. It's really planning for the future, understanding the increases in health insurance and OPEB liabilities and pension, and, all of it is part of that. And, another thing we've been successful in Hanover, and I'm not sure, do you guys, the meals tax, did you vote to do the meals tax in Ipswich? Okay. In Hanover, we took that money to fund our OPEB. That money goes directly to fund the OPEB liability, which now is up over a little over $2 million in that account. I wasn't sure. Look to find out what you guys are doing with those funds. I'm not sure. Are they rolled into the operating budget, or?
I will defer to our Director of Finance, but that is used in part for open space.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Could I just follow up on that one? Does Hanover use the open checkbook software?
Not yet. We're in the process of implementing that now.
So you guys are bringing that on?
Yeah, yeah. We're a little behind the eight ball. I won't say the deadline, I thought was 2017, but we're behind the eight ball now. We have our budget up online, but the open checkbook we're not compliant with yet. We're working on that. We also brought in a new software called VisiGov, which allows us to take our budget and our expenses and give a visual representation of how much so you can go in and enter your total tax bill. You're paying $6,000 in taxes. It'll break down exactly what percentage is going to education, what's going to public safety, what's going to town government, and it does that visually with graphs and charts, so it seems to be something that the residents wanted, so it's something we brought to town.
And does that fall under your IT, which is handled by the schools?
IT and finance, because it was a big finance component, because we had to generate the spreadsheets and the budgets and the reports to, feed it.
Got pie charts.
Yeah. Lots of pie charts, yeah.
Any follow-up questions?
I have no further follow-up, I have some of my own.
Okay.
You all set? Okay, thanks. And actually, our follow-ups. From just previous, I just wondered if we could flesh out a couple of your answers a little more.
Sure.
One of the things that you mentioned is that your whole career you've been a think-out-of-the-box thinker.
Yes.
So this should be a softball.
Okay.
Don't you hate that?
It's all right.
Don't you hate that?
It should be a softball.
You said it earlier,
Let's see
the
what the
X.
question is, yeah.
So this is gonna be easy, right? So give us an example in municipal government where you've done something that was out of the box and tell us give us a real result. I did X and it was out of the box, and what it meant was the town got Y.
Sure. I mean, for me, it's the economic development piece. I reached out to several landowners and tried to negotiated them, putting them properties on the market at the same time, knowing that there was one developer that wanted to come in and put this larger, building in, merge the lots together and do that. So by putting those outside the box thinking, you don't see a lot of municipal governments out there actually trying to put development deals together for the most part, which is what we ended up doing. We married these two people, knowing that they were going to be able to, put this deal together. And that happened with this new Brothers Roast Beef building they bought in town. Another thing is we had a property outside the box thinking it was in tax title, knowing that it was probably a better off use as a new business, because this guy was a failing business and the family wasn't interested in keeping it going. So we ended up moving forward and taking the property in tax title, and then ended up putting it on the market putting it out to bid, and then ultimately the person who wanted to go there bought it, and we've got a new business coming to town there as well.
So what proportion of your tax base is residential versus commercial?
We're probably 70-30, 70 residential, 30 commercial.
So a second follow-up question. So one of the things you've said a couple times is, well, when we think about this thing, it depends on what the board wants.
Yeah.
The reality is, though, that the board's split often, right? And like everyone that's a career professional, you don't check your brain at the door, as Jim Engel used to say. You come in, you have an opinion, and you're gonna try to influence the board. So how do you do that without being combative?
I try to listen a lot. I listen to the board and I try to get a flavor for what why you say that there might be, obviously there's differing opinions, you got 5-member board, everyone's gonna have their own opinion. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you can probably get some core values and core things that the board's looking for out of it. And that'll be done through what I hope to do a strategic planning session with the board. I've done that twice now in Hanover, and it's been great, and we sort of use those strategic goals to guide our work for the year.
Try to find common ground.
Common ground, what people are looking for. All right, we all want this, but ultimately we're looking for, a better downtown or better this, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then I'll use that to, go out and look for ways to make that happen. And obviously, and I'll bring my ideas to the board and find out, say, hey, this is something I'm thinking about doing, what do you think? And try to gain consensus that way, and obviously have it be a well thought out idea with all the data and the facts to back it up.
Good answer. One other question. So has Hanover bought any parcels for open space?
Yes.
And if so, how many dollars have you spent?
We've used we've had CPC funds for a while now, and we've used them on open space. We probably purchased over 100 acres anyway. It's really been targeted towards increasing our trail system, finding parcels that'll connect other parcels, and so we can expand our trail system that we have in town. Sure, no problem.
So, economic development.
Yes.
We have a lot of people in town who would probably be jumping up and down when you're talking about growing smart and looking in downtown and recognizing that we could use some more economic development. We also have a lot of people who don't want Ipswich to change at all. It seems like they just want it to freeze in time. Ipswich is great, it's
Yep.
perfect, don't screw it up.
Right.
How do you balance that?
Like I said, we'll start with the strategic planning session with the board, but that's just going to be relationship building, gaining trust not only with this board, but myself with the community, and being able to bring forward ideas that they're going to bite. Not everybody's going to like a new idea, but if you started with, created an economic development team that could focus on downtown, let's say just its downtown area, and we come up with a plan. And that plan's going to change 5 or 10 times before we finish it, but bring that plan forward, have public forums, get people involved, explain what the benefits are going to be, and there'll be the naysayers. Ipswich is no different than any other town, same in Hanover. Everyone still thinks it's a little cottage bedroom community, and, we're going to keep everything the same, and, nothing should change. We don't want to see any new housing, and, you get a lot of not in my backyard kind of mentality. But if change takes time, and it's not easy, but it all starts with the relationship building. It starts with gaining consensus. It starts with having an idea that everybody's behind. So that'll start with this board, and, we come forward and we say, okay, this is an idea for downtown. Let's see if we can push it forward. And they may not like all aspects of it, and we may end up tweaking it, but ultimately you'll get something that'll come forward to town meeting and get the business community and the residents excited about. It's not gonna, it'll take time, but it will happen. And that'll just be through persistence, and that's, like I said, I've got another 20 years to work, so I got plenty of time to do it.
The young guy, got 20 years. He's gonna outlast us.
Yeah, exactly.
When are you getting married?
April 6th. I don't know, Burlington.
Okay, does anybody else have some follow-ups?
Could I just ask one quick
Yeah,
question?
absolutely.
And I apologize for taking this one from you.
No? Oh, for me?
No, from Ed.
Oh, okay.
So, hiring and firing.
Yes.
So I'm a department head, I need someone, I need to hire somebody to come in. Who ultimately makes a decision to hire that person, and how much input do you take from the department head?
I take quite a bit of input from the department head, because ultimately they have to work with the person. But it's, on that level, the department head recommends somebody for approval, for the town manager to approve that position, that hire. So I tend to let them go through the whole interview process, and then whoever the finalist is, I'll meet with them with the department head and just get a flavor, kind of get a feel for the person, but I haven't had a time yet where I haven't moved forward with who they've selected. We have solid department heads in Hanover, and, they tend to pick good people. So just recently we had to hire 4 firefighters because we were successful in getting what's called the SAFER grant. So we were able to hire 4 firefighters. We get reimbursed 75% of the salary for the first year, and then that drops to 50 and 25, through year 2 and 3. But the goal being is we're looking to increase our staffing on each shift, but also increase the number of ambulance runs that we do, because we do our own ambulance service in town. So hoping the ambulance receipts will, offset. We've done the calculations to prove that out to be true, but the increased ambulance. So I sat in on all those interviews with the incoming firefighters, and I enjoyed them, and we all ended up getting 4 really qualified candidates. A little bit harder now with the not everybody being paramedic certified, and getting them off the civil service list, but we were able to do that. And I recently had to replace 2 long-standing department heads in our library director and COA director. We replaced them. They did a search and actually involved the committees in the process. So we made it a collaborative effort. Had a couple of the committee members from the library trustees and this Council on Aging Board involved in the interviews, and it ended up getting 2 great employees that are really actually working well together now. So
So the weight of the department heads, you take that really into consideration. This is the right person. It's not a committee that comes to you and says, well, we think we should hire Linda. You're saying the department head says it should be Linda. You're feeling that's the way to go.
sure. I mean, unless they, have a criminal background or something like that, but yeah.
Okay, unless they have a criminal background?
Yeah. Well, just saying, I mean, if they've done something enough what we've done, yeah. Maybe we want to reconsider that.
Excellent, thanks.
I'm kind of interested in first impressions. So you've at least been through town this morning, and
Yes.
what are the 3 sort of impressions you're left with about Ipswich?
a lot to handle. Like I said, other than the coastal town, I got that same feel. I got out and, I used to go out on Saturday mornings a lot down in Hanover, and they'd be the same, people at the transfer station, or like you got going on the day, the Pinewood Derbies with Boy Scouts, all of that goes on at our local church. I've been to those events, the Eagle Scout events and things like that. So that really, kind of resonates with me. I was raised in a small town, the neighboring town of Hanover, Pembroke. That was my hometown. So, I was raised down there. So I like that about it. What I really like about it is the coastal aspect. That's something I really want to get at. I love the ocean, and I want to, living in a town like this is something I've always wanted to do, so I look forward to that.
Future agenda, the coast is going to loom large, I think.
Correct, absolutely. Yeah, as we've seen recently in the last, the storms we're only supposed to get every, 20 or 30 years came back to back, within a few months of each other. So, yeah, as I said in my first interview, global warming's a real thing. The oceans are rising, the glaciers are melting. So we're seeing more drastic storms. It's something we're all going to have to deal with. So, that's a given. The third thing is I just like what you do have that Hanover doesn't is the downtown feel. That's really what I like, the downtown area. I've spent time here, partaking in a few of the local drinking establishments and attending weddings over at the Crane Estate and things like that. So I really like that about Ipswich. I like the downtown area and being able to walk around and, enjoy that. So that's something that
Do you see promise in the downtown?
oh, without a doubt. It's already a great downtown, but I definitely see there's huge potential here.
Still keeping some of the character.
Without a doubt. Try to keep all of the character, but yes. But, you can build and still do the same, do that. One of my pride and joys in before I became a municipal employee, I restored an old antique house down in Falmouth with a very particular business owner who actually, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Pine Hills or not down in Plymouth. The owner of Pine Hills, we redid his house down there in Falmouth, and he was very particular with what he wanted in antiques and whatnot. And so this house ended up looking exactly like it did before with all of the bells and whistles on the inside. So, I've definitely taken time to do that, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You've heard we have old houses.
I'm well aware. I'm well aware what the historical implications and all of that are, yeah. I deal with that constantly.
All right, if no one else has any questions, I guess I'd throw it to you. Do you have any questions? If not, if you have any concluding remarks or comments you'd like to share with us?
No, I guess just with regard to the process, what's the next steps after today as the board, the final interviews? Would it be a future Board of Selectmen meeting where you'll decide, or?
So, I think there's a potential that we could discuss and decide today, later
Okay.
today.
Yeah.
If we don't get to that conclusion today, then we'd be doing it at a future meeting.
Okay.
Our next meeting is on Monday.
All right, great.
I think we're looking forward to making a decision sooner than later.
Sure.
And we kind of discussed before you were here that, if we do in fact make a decision today, it would be sort of pending some kind of like additional checks that we would want to make or
Sure. Yeah.
something like
No
that. But
worries, I'm a
that's-
Boy Scout, no
yeah,
worries there.
But that's sort of, I'm a Boy Scout too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anything else?
No, you've answered all my questions. So, regard to concluding statements, like I said, I'm very happy to be here, happy to be considered to be your next town manager. I think it would be a great fit for both the town and myself. Everything I've done worked up to here has got me to this point. I'm the kind of leader I think I'll be able to come into town hall and put an enthusiasm and an energetic environment in here, but get everybody to know that I'm invested in their future here in town hall and really work with them to forward their careers. I've been able to do that in Hanover, and it's one of the things I take pride in. One of the stories I always tell is we had one of our employees, who was now our health agent, actually ended up getting stage 4 colon cancer early on in my career. We almost lost her, but we supported her. I ended up convincing the Board of Selectmen to actually pay her half wages for a while. And she actually came back, full recovery. I always joke she's my new hero, because she just basically had the positive attitude that we kept fostering and said, I didn't have time for this, and I've got 3 kids, and that was it. But we had the job ready for her when she came back, and then that's one of the people we made assistant health agent and fostered and grew, and now she's, taking over and running the whole department. So that's one of my success stories, and I look to do that here. You have to invest in your employees, and you got to take an effort in making sure that they want to keep doing the same job, that's fine, but if there's career growth they're looking for, we need to be here to help them do that. So I'll look to do that, and I always joke around and say the work we do is serious, but we don't always have to be, so there'll be a few jokes and quick wit and humor that'll be thrown in there as well. So that's what you get when you get me. So.
Great. Thanks for coming out, Tony.
No problem, thanks for having me.
Go take a nap.
Yeah, exactly.
Some rest.
I'm actually going back to work. So. I brought a couple of copies of this. you guys want to take a look at? Yeah. Appreciate it. Nice to see you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thanks. Appreciate it.
And we will be interviewing Robin Stein. And we are ready to go. No.
He's gonna be back in a minute.
Introduce Robin Stein.
Hi.
Good to see you again.
Robin, Bill Kraft, nice to meet you.
Good to see you again.
Okay, the festivities will be managed by the chairman of the screening committee.
Good morning. Nice to see you again. So we have a list of questions, and sometimes we're asking questions off of these, and sometimes we're just making it up as we go. Also, we'll have some follow-ups where people kind of feel motivated. So sort of like last time, but half the people. So less intimidating this time, right? And so we're just kind of going down the line. So we'll start over there with Nishan, and we'll just make our way down.
So thanks for coming today, this morning. How was the ride up here?
No problem at all. Nice and easy. Yes.
So we had an opportunity to review your resume and your history. So if you could, Robin, could you spend a little bit, just tell us a little bit about yourself? Why you're interested in this particular
So I started my career as a trial attorney, did a lot of municipal legal work and really liked it, and came to really value working in public service and the role that local government plays in people's lives.
Hey,
And- Yes.
say one time out. If you could just, we have the mic set, so you got to have it right in your face.
Okay.
Like inches away.
Is that better?
Maybe even a little closer.
All right.
You just gotta kind of pull it. You
How's
gotta
that?
There you go.
give it a, come here, you, and get it really
That better?
close.
Like a rock star.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at his mic.
He's the worst. He's the worst.
All right.
Okay.
Is this working better?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So, back to your question. I feel very strongly about the role that local government plays in people's lives, and the opportunity to work in public service and local government has been great for me, and I've really enjoyed it. And I'm a people person. I want to work in an environment where I'm working with people and serving people, and in local government, you get to do that both as a deliverer of services to a community, but also as an employer and somebody who's setting a tone and creating an environment for people to be successful. I find I do my best work when I have a senior leadership position where I can help make decisions that are made informed in the whole organization. I want that senior level of responsibility. I want to be in a senior leadership position where I'm having interesting days, doing all sorts of different things, and I'm able to help as many people as possible. And, I have a love of learning. I've really become a student of local government over the last 4 years. And, consistent with the goals that I set for myself, I'm looking for a senior position. I think I bring to a position like this a very unique combination of being very bright and articulate, but also very compassionate, and looking to work in a community like Ipswich that has really everything in it that made me move to the North Shore to begin with, which is a respect for open space, the oceans, history, culture, and engaged citizenry, smart people who very much value their community. And so I think that I'm going to come here as a leader in the community, ready to take on that responsibility, bringing the strategic financial acumen, the skills, the experiences necessary to lead a community, that this type of community is an excellent fit for me and for what I bring and for my goals.
Good morning. Thanks again for being here. So we're looking for a strong leader and a problem solver who's going to take our concerns and address them in a way that's going to make us a stronger organization. So could you give us some examples of your leadership and problem-solving style?
Sure. For me, I think it all starts with listening. I think that I have excellent problem-solving skills, but before you can tackle a problem, you have to fully understand it. And so, I really like to make sure that I'm getting first-person information about whatever that problem is, that I'm not just receiving information from other places, but that you take the time to investigate a problem and understand it, study it, learn about it. It may take a few minutes, it may take longer, depending on the nature of the problem. Getting feedback from the people that are interested, from the stakeholders, and then, being able to make a thoughtful suggestion. I do think I'm excellent at problem solving, throughout my career, whether it was resolving cases, whether it's been working in local government. I've tackled all sorts of different issues, opportunities to be creative, which I enjoy, and, I think I do have really strong skills in that. Are you looking for some specific examples?
Sure.
So, just one example, I can give is just the success. I wouldn't call them problems, but the success that I've been able to have in negotiating over a dozen union contracts in the last 3 years between two communities. And I wouldn't necessarily call them a problem, but they're a challenge. And so being able to come in and understand fully how the town's finances work and how the town's budgets work and how everything fits together, so I can go in and meet with employees and talk to them about their concerns and their questions and their goals and objectives and how those things can fit together and how we can best marry those things together to have successful negotiations, to get folks back to work in a way where they feel good and it's positive for the community, and it's positive for the employees. And that's an approach I like to take to most situations.
I see that you have been a practicing lawyer.
Yes.
How, are there things about that background, that training, that perspective that helps you with your management style or with the problem solving? Or is it one of those things that's nice to have in your background and really it's the hands-on knowing how to work with people that's more important?
Oh, I think both. I think absolutely being an attorney has prepared me well for working in local government. I was trained, I worked with very good lawyers, was mentored throughout my career by some great people, and I learned how to very quickly look at a situation, analyze a situation, understand that situation. I think I have excellent instincts, and those have been heightened over the years through that work. I'm a quick study. I'm very adept at understanding a lot of different things at a very granular level very quickly, and a lot of it comes from having a legal training. I also had an opportunity as a lawyer. When things break down and they end up in litigation, you see all the things that didn't work along the way. And so I learned a lot of lessons by the time cases came to me doing litigation about maybe if things that had been done differently that they never would have ended up with us to begin with. And so, those are all lessons too that I take and apply. You can't think like a lawyer and a manager at the same time because they're different roles and you have to make different decisions. I think as a manager, I am more uniquely suited to receive legal advice and legal services and make good decisions with that because I understand where it's coming from. I've been in those shoes. I've been an assistant city solicitor. I've given that advice. So, I think it enhances everything I do.
So among other things, being a lawyer will help us to avoid lawyers.
Hopefully.
A little bit more about the experiences you've had in working directly with people, holding them accountable, and just maybe one or two examples of things that work well, maybe things that haven't worked so well and that you have better insight into.
Sure. I think that when you're leading an organization, you have to lead by example, and you have to set a tone for yourself and your employees of the type of environment that you want to have. And when you do that, and then there are problems, you're better able to deal with them. And so, if you are an honest, open, trustworthy person who's developed good relationships with the people that you work with, you're in a better situation anytime, you need to be holding somebody accountable. And you hope that you would be able to do that privately in a low-key manner where you just discuss what worked and what didn't work, and then everyone just moves on, and you don't hold grudges, and, issues don't grow that didn't need to grow. But I think you have to handle things directly. The people that you work with, the people that work for you, the people that you work for, need those open lines of communication so that people aren't guessing about what's going on. You just handle situations. If there's a problem, you deal with it. And when something is positive, you make a point of acknowledging that so that you're always balancing those equities. But that, you take what comes and you deal with it and you move on to the next thing. And you don't let things fester.
In those rare circumstances where it isn't positive and a different kind of conversation, trusted people? What's been your experience in that regard?
I mean, those conversations are always hard, but my experience is that you need to be open and honest and direct with people. I always try to treat people compassionately. I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. We've all made mistakes. You know, when somebody has an issue that you need to address, you know, you hope that, you know, that they're coming to it understanding that something didn't work and we need to talk about it, but that you do it privately and you move on from it. But you have to be willing to do it. I mean, you can't let things fester. You can't harbor issues. You can't go in a roundabout way. From my experience, you have to just give people that respect of dealing with them honestly and then moving on. And usually, things work out fine.
As a quick follow-up, can you get more specific? You mentioned kind of setting a tone. How?
So for me personally, I would never want somebody that worked with me or for me to feel like they ever worked harder or more committed to the job than I was. So coming in every day, being present, being available, working hard, taking a servant leadership approach of teamwork, collaboration, getting input from a lot of people, showing people that you respect them, you respect their opinions, you respect the value that they bring to the organization. There's a lot of folks here that have been here for a long time, and they know a lot more about what's going on here than I do. And so always being open to the contributions that other people have to make to the organization and the work that you do, I think establishes the tone and the type of environment that I would like to see as a leader and a manager in a community.
Robin, thank you for taking time out of your Saturday, especially this Saturday, to come and see us. And I'm sure at the end of this process, people will say that the storm, that wind brought in the right candidate, and perhaps you're that candidate. Of course, it could go the other way in 5 years. People could say, remember that storm we had before so-and-so started? It was an ill wind.
Why wasn't it brought
But that'll be our cross to bear as the hiring authority, not yours. So I had a question about sort of thinking about your first year. And the way I'd ask you to think about the question is, let's pretend you were just dropped into any job as a CEO. Forget town manager for a minute. What would be your priorities in, say, the first 30 to 60, and then 60 to 90 days, that sort of time frame? And then specifically, so answer it just generically, and try to think, as a manager, as a CEO, when I mean manager, I mean as a manager of people and a CEO, what do my top priorities have to be? And try to do that as much as you can without thinking about town manager, and then jump into town manager in Ipswich, if that would be different or specific, what that would look like. Do you understand the question?
Yes. So, I mean, obviously, just the timing of things, whoever comes into this position is coming in right before town meeting. And so those 30, 60, 90 days, there's going to be a lot of focus on just getting...
So you jumped to the second one first. So forget your town manager.
I apologize.
I'm dropping you into an organization as CEO.
Gotcha.
What do you need to think about if you're going to run Acme Inc. that makes widgets? Think of it that way.
Well, I mean, obviously, for me, the first thing is just getting to know people and getting to know the environment and the culture, the employees as well as residents, business owners. I think you spend, the first quarter of any new job, even the first year, I think it can take a whole year really to fully get up to speed on everything that you're doing and experience everything once. But for me, it's getting out, meeting as many people as possible, learning as much as I can about the organization, about the structures, the history, the local practices, the things that are different from town to town that are necessary to know and understand, the people, the players, the priority issues.
To listen.
Yes.
Okay, so that's
absolutely.
number one.
And learn names and
Right.
people and the community. And, you guys have a lot of interesting environmental issues and things like that. So it's also getting out and learning the lay of the land, which I know bleeds a little bit into your next question, but
Right.
the customer base, let's say.
Okay.
And then, specific tips, which it is, like I said, it's going to be coming into town meeting. So obviously that's going to
But
be.
can I just clarify?
Sure.
So the first one generically is listen, get to know, learn.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Understanding.
Are there any others beyond that one generically in the first 30, 60, 90 days?
I mean, I think just getting the lay of the land is the most important thing. I wouldn't say it's just listening. I would say it's learning the systems, learning the
Right.
people, learning the organization, who the players are, who's your longest department heads, your newer department heads, key resources in the community, the business community, the constituent community. I would say it's just learning about the
Sure,
organization.
yeah, that makes sense, great.
And then, organizationally specific, I think that, obviously just the timing of things, town meeting is going to be a big priority. It looks to me like you guys are going to have some big things on for town meeting. It looks like there's a school project coming up. There were a few other items that I saw coming for town meeting, and so,
Gonna be a
that's.
busy one, yeah.
It looks like it's going to be a busy one, so that's going to be a big focus. And then, I'm sure there are going to be other specific things that come up. I don't know that before June that you would tackle them, but there are certainly things that I saw as I prepared for the interview that I would have questions about, that I would look to, whether or not, were possibilities for us. I saw that you guys had one item in on community compact. There is an opportunity to do some more community compact work, so I would certainly want to look and just make sure we weren't missing an opportunity to get some resources in under that program. The nature of it, I don't really know yet, but it seems like the opportunities are out there. So some of those things that I know are time sensitive that are out there, I would want to make sure to pay attention to. But I think a lot of organizational specific things would really come out of what, I learned in that first piece.
Sure, yeah, it makes total sense. Thank you.
So you mentioned the school.
Yes.
The school has been a hot topic in our town. And there's been it's made the town, there's some divisiveness amongst the community. How do you, as a town manager, how do you address that? How not only do you, address divisiveness in a community, how do you build a community's trust in its town government?
Sure. Well, I think, again, it starts with listening, and it starts with being open and available and visible in the community for people to come and get to know you and speak with you and find out that you're an honest, trustworthy person who's qualified to be here, who has the strategic financial acumen to do the job. And so you start to build some trust and some equity in who you are and what you're doing. And then, it's really discovering the issues, meeting with people, learning their concerns, and then seeing what you can do to try to lead those people together. Specifically on something like the school project, it's really understanding all of the different issues and all of the different concerns and the factors that are outside of the town's control, like the MSBA process and what they're willing to support and what they're not willing to support, and how you can then try to bring all of those interests together in a way that ultimately, I think it would be unrealistic to think everybody was going to be happy about everything, but in a way where people can find some common ground, they can support the project, they can move a project forward in the best interest of the kids, and maybe you end up with a mix of the goals that came from some of the different sectors. And that's something I would always look to do. Mediating through different interests is a part of this job. It's something I did as an attorney. It's something I've done, obviously in local government. But again, it starts with listening. It starts with being open. And it's another opportunity to be creative in the role and maybe bring something back to folks, because when people are really passionate about something and they're seeing it, kind of their way, maybe you can be that role that says, well, have you thought of this or have you thought of that? And kind of is that trusted neutral party that can break through some of that on any number of issues.
So a quick follow-up, how, can you give some specifics in what type of communication practices as a town manager have you set up in the past? What have you had the most success with?
Sure. So one example is something we did in Danvers. We created an IT steering committee, which is an internal steering committee of folks that work in different departments throughout the town who do the most work within their department to touch IT. And that was a great opportunity, and it was a great way to make sure, as we were making changes to our technology, updating systems, updating our data center, making changes to domains and websites and things like that, that we didn't interfere with somebody else's work. So anytime we were about to roll out a new change or a different change, we would get the committee together, we would discuss it, we would make sure folks were going back to their departments and communicating back out. We have a lot of systems that are automated with the state or automated with banks or automated with different services that we wanted to make sure that we didn't interfere with or create problems for. If we had just said, well, tomorrow we're switching over, that domain, it could have created a problem and could not have. So we created this group, started with that, went back to that same group when it was time to build a new town website, very successful in a big team effort in building a new town website, and just created this group of people that were there to communicate out, that we could communicate through, who could bring back issues, started to develop priorities of other technology items that we wanted to address, but it was a great experience.
Okay, thanks.
So, another question that I have for you, Robin, see, I'm not a good example, is pertaining to when you're coming in and you're, as you say, getting the lay of the land and working through things. One of the things that one of my little pet peeves is when someone says, well, that's how you've always done things. That was before I got here, and kind of let it go, and don't have the strength or confidence enough in themselves to come to the Board of Selectmen and says, listen, I see this system or this process has been going on for years. I think it doesn't work, and I think I have a better idea for that. So I don't know if you've had that in the past with your Danvers and the other experiences you've had where you come to a board and said, this isn't working. I know that this is what you've always been doing, but I think I have a better idea, and this is my suggestion. Have you had that kind of experience in the past, and you feel confident enough to be able to do that to a board? Even though we may say no, you just have the confidence to say, this is what I think you guys really need to be doing going forward.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what you're hiring a professional manager for, right? It's to bring ideas forward, it's to bring ideas to the table. I certainly, I agree with you. I'm not a fan of, well, that's just how we always did it. I'm also not a fan of change for the sake of change, but I think that we should constantly be revisiting our systems, especially in light of changing technologies. We may look at something and study it and decide that we don't want to make any changes to it, but we'll have done that exercise and we'll have looked at it. We may look at something and say it is worth changing, but then we need to really be thoughtful about how we do it, and it might take longer to do it than some people would like, but you want to make sure that you've involved interested stakeholders and talked to them, and so that component of it, I'm with you. I think that you have to be malleable, you have to be willing to change, you have to be willing to at least consider change. And, just being that I've only been in assistant roles as a chief of staff, I haven't taken those things directly to a board, but I've certainly taken those things up through an organization. One example I can give recently in Danvers was that we had over 1,000 employees receiving direct deposit, and every week the accounting department was still printing paper pay stubs for them, which took up valuable time of talented accountants, was wasting paper, was wasting ink. So we looked at the system and we talked to our vendor for our financials and found that we actually could be delivering them over email. So we put a plan in place to implement a changeover to emailing those to people. It was tremendously successful. We had very little pushback. We discussed it with our IT steering committee before we did it. We tested it in small groups. We communicated with our unions about it. We put a plan together for accomplishing it. And so, that's just an example of, just a change that at first I think some folks may have been concerned about, but in the end worked quite well. And, for me, when I see something that I want to accomplish, I'd like to, start with that accomplishment and work back, breaking down the steps to how I think it's best to get there. And that's just the same process I would approach here.
Okay. Great, thanks.
So Ipswich has a very successful shellfish industry here, and toward that end, we have a lot of concerns about our environmental issues, climate change, sustainability, green community initiatives. Can you tell us what your experience with that is, and maybe give us some examples of efforts that you've been involved in?
Sure. So I had an opportunity to read over the Great Marsh Coastal Adaptation Plan, which had a tremendous amount of information in it about some of those issues and the sustainability, and it certainly looks like the town's going to have some interesting challenges, but it looks like people are really committed to doing good work with it here. Danvers doesn't have the shellfish issues. It has dredging issues. Their marina is so inland that it often has issues. So we were working on funding for dredging plans. We have our harbor master is also our environmental manager as well. So work very closely with him, looking at different issues. They have some open space issues and other concerns that are a little bit different than Ipswich's, but definitely aware of those issues, have looked into them, from that perspective before. I'm very aware of the issues that you guys are dealing with, as well as some of the really good work that you guys are doing. I know there's been marsh restoration work done around here that's been successful in improving barrier areas, working with the Commonwealth. And, it looks like you guys are on a good path with it, but some definitely challenging issues that we'll probably have some fun with over the years.
So does Danvers have solar farms or windmills or any of those initiatives that?
No, Danvers, Danvers Municipal Electric, so the electric department itself is invested in some renewables, but there is no specific solar or windmills in Danvers. I know years ago, when I chaired the zoning board in Salem, we permitted some, test wind facilities in the community. I've seen those, come up in different places, and I'm definitely aware of how they work. When I was in Methuen, we had a very, very active net metering program. We were maxed out on our net metering credits, so we were invested in a couple different projects. Methuen happened to be one of the communities that was split. You can only buy solar out of the region the solar is generated in, and it happened that Methuen was split into two regions, so there was some active management of that program for us, because we had to make sure that we are buying the solar from the region that it was then going to go into in Methuen. So, this school could only use solar from here, and that school could only use solar from there, but we were tremendous savings, six-figure savings out of that program from the different projects that Methuen was invested in.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about the dredging in Danvers.
So, it's just an issue. It keeps coming up. Just between erosion and other environmental concerns, it's just something that they always have to stay on top of. So every year budget process, we're talking about, funding that we can get together. Do we have the funding? Can we put the funding towards, dredging projects? And it's always just balancing those interests against others. But I don't think it's ever going to be not an issue.
So has there been actual dredging
There was
recently? Or?
Previously, and they're gearing up for it again, but not while I was there. So they were looking at procurements for engineering services and issues like that to do it again.
And is it within like a regional program, like maybe with Beverly or
This was
Salem?
This was not
Okay.
particularly, but, certainly I think that when you have environmental concerns, you want to think regionally. Your water is their water, and your issues, they're all similar up and down the coast. So, that's definitely a place where that you should be thinking about it.
Okay, thank you.
Back to the dredging for a minute. What role has conservation or the Conservation Committee in Danvers played with regard to dredging, or what groups have been enthusiastic and those not so enthusiastic?
So in Danvers, it wasn't conservation as much that was involved as our natural resources folks. It was almost more of a rec function, because the harbor master was the natural resources director, and he was in the recreation department. He managed parks as well as the marina, and those efforts were really led by them.
So you feel, is your impression that conservation issues played as important a role as recreation did?
Yes.
Whether or not to dredge and let more boats in and so on?
I think that they're all related, and they were led more out of the natural resources functions. The conservation functions, they work together, but we had a natural resources director who was the harbor master, so.
Tell me a little bit about your experience in actually working through the budget processes with department heads, not necessarily your own, but in facilitating that process, and what's been your experience, and what would you like to see done better?
Sure. So in both Methuen and in Danvers, they had similar budget processes where department heads would submit proposed budgets. In Methuen, it came to myself, the auditor, and the mayor. In Danvers, myself, the finance director, the town manager, and we would sit with different department heads and talk through their budgets, look at what they were interested in doing, what they were proposing, and then everything kind of gets fed in, and you see what you can afford, and then you kind of start chipping away, unfortunately. Like I said, I consider myself a student of local government. I spend a lot of time talking with colleagues in other communities about how they do things. The finance area is of particular interest to me, so I've had some really nice conversations with folks in other cities and towns about how they do their budget processes, and learn some things that I would like to maybe try, or at least consider trying. I know in Lexington, for example, they have everyone submit level service budgets, and then they have everyone submit a separate kind of section when they submit for anything that's above the level service. So not level funded, but level service, what does it take to do exactly what you did this year, next year, the cost, and then proposals for the delta, and then their department heads come together and discuss it. And I think that's a really nice process because it lets all of the department heads kind of see what new things may be coming down the line from each other and from their colleagues. And I'm told out of that process that there are times when folks will say, yours seems more important, maybe I could wait on mine. And I think growing that support, growing that respect amongst your leaders and your leadership team is a really interesting way to do the budget. I don't know that I would try that exact model, but I know that there are lots of different people out there doing different things. And, I definitely think that there are some things that you can do, whether it's your budget process or other processes that are a continued part of kind of your engagement of your employees and your workforce. And so having that be an open, communicative process is really interesting to me.
Now, part of what you talked about is determining how to expend resources. Have you also been a part of the estimating, guesstimating, or science of estimating revenues?
I've been involved in the conversations of those, certainly, but they're usually led by your finance folks, and then we talk about them. We talk about how we got to them. I've always been in communities that were very conservative on estimating new growth, conservative, I think as you should be, estimating new growth, estimating, revenues, things like that. Obviously, you want to take a look at your estimates from the last couple of years. You want to take a look at exactly where you are in time right then and see how you're comparing to those estimates. I liked when I saw, looking at your budget, at least for last year, and I would assume you guys are doing that again this year, that you're putting forth a balanced budget without including any increase in state aid, which I think is a nice way for you guys to have a cushion in your budget here, especially since you have a high percentage of state aid coming in at 12%, putting together a balanced budget with all of those estimates that doesn't take into account maybe 3+% of state aid is a nice way to generate some free cash potentially, but it's a nice way to protect against having such a high reliance on state aid. It certainly looks like you guys have a good process together for how you're formulating your budget.
Have you ever had to defend free cash against the taxpayers?
You mean the use of it or the amount of it?
The amount of it.
No, no. I mean, honestly, you guys have about 3% free cash, just 1.6 million, I think. I mean, I think that's an okay amount, but it's on the low end, I think, of what you'd like to see for free cash, maybe 3 to 5% free cash. So, I mean, you're in range.
So we're not profligate in that.
No, I mean, and you only left, I think, $120,000 worth of levy capacity last year, so more than Danvers left, but it's not an astronomical amount of levy capacity. It looks like the things that you're doing with your budget are very sound.
Glad to hear that. What have you done specifically with economic development?
Sure. So starting even as an attorney, I did a lot of land use work, and so I worked with a lot of clients in the economic development world and got to see their businesses and learn their businesses and, how they approach things. And I've taken that same understanding into municipal government. I work very closely with the economic development director in Methuen. Methuen was a gateway city, and so we work very closely with Mass Development. Had an opportunity to apply for some of their TDI grants. Really big focus on Methuen's downtown area. I work very closely on those. Danvers obviously is a town. It's not a gateway city. We don't work as closely with those type of organizations, but work very, very closely with our planning department, our planning director, and other folks on building economic development. We recently passed 40R zoning, smart growth zoning in Danvers, that we're hoping is going to lead to some mixed use downtown living and working, and really taking more of a holistic, broad picture of economic development. From my perspective, the way that you provide senior services is part of your economic development. The way that you provide recreation services is part of your economic development. The product that you're putting out for your residents, for your visitors, for your businesses, it's all part of economic development. And so once again, having a broad range understanding of community goals, understanding that focus infuses all of those things, because you want to make sure that what you're doing all fits together. And actually, it looks like you guys had a good model for that. I noticed in your, you have your 2003 economic development plan that you updated in 2007, and I think I read it was coming for an update in 2017, but I didn't see that update. Looked like you really had integrated your community goals, especially as to natural resources and open space, into your economic development goals and objectives. I'm curious if folks are really using the form that's in there at board meetings. I thought that was kind of neat. I didn't know if it was working in practice, but, I mean, it looks like a ton of thought went into the work that you're doing. Even with the downtown plan from 2009, I know it wasn't adopted, but I was very impressed to see that you had over 600 people respond to the survey that with them in that plan, and that seems like a wonderful baseline to build off of. So it looks like you have a lot of good systems out there.
Thank you. Danvers is pretty accessible, as I've wandered around, looked at the sidewalks and so on. How have you achieved that?
Honestly, that's how Danvers was. I mean, that's not attributable to me. So, I think that folks in Danvers would probably tell you that we need more accessibility, and that's actually something we are looking at in their High Street corridor. It's that strip kind of Route 35 near the fire station, and it's heavily commercial and a lot of curb cuts. And I think, zoning years ago, everyone wanted their own curb cut and their own driveway and their own access, and now we're starting to learn with more modern planning principles that maybe that's not as necessary. It makes it a lot harder for people to walk if you're pulling out of the McDonald's and immediately into the gas station, and their curb cuts are 5 feet from each other. Could we do better planning? Could we do better work with some changes in philosophy on how we do those things that make things more walkable? I think the state's Complete Streets program is great, and that's really helpful in getting some funding and some help in doing those things. But, there's a lot of good resources out there, but I can't take credit for Danvers.
Thank you.
What can you tell us about staff development in the time you've been in Danvers?
I specifically, I managed the IT and the procurement functions, and I worked very, very closely with the staff there to grow and develop. Shortly after I came to Danvers, we hired our first ever IT director, so the IT functions fell under my department, but it kind of went from IT staff to assistant town manager, and there wasn't a working, knowledgeable manager in the department, and we were very, very lucky to get a very talented IT director, and I worked very, very closely with him, and I think very successfully, not only IT side of things, but on, growing as a manager, and I think it was a great relationship. We learned a lot from each other about how we'd approach situations, how we deal with situations, growing the IT department as a business partner within the organization had some growing pains, so how does this new department and this new department head fit into the whole organization? And we would talk a lot about just, if there was an issue or a question or we wanted to make a change, what's the best way to approach that change? How are we respectful of the history and the practice here, but also moving things forward? Technology sometimes wants to move faster than everyone else in local government. And so, for me, that was just a great learning experience. I think it was, on both sides.
Great, okay. Just an unrelated question, but I am curious to, and I know we're kind of running on the bend. I might not get another chance. So, you saw like a community profile. Were there, and we can answer the inverse too. So was there a challenge we have or something on our radar that's coming up that you saw, let me phrase it a different way. Which one of those things that you looked at did you feel the least comfortable tackling or the least equipped? And then on the other side, maybe there's one that you said, oh, that one, I can't wait to get my teeth into that one because I just solved that problem. Or I know somebody that did. I know what the solution should be. So could you give us sort of an example of each one of those or more if you...
Sure. I wouldn't say I'm ill-equipped to handle any of those, but I think that the school project that you have coming up is going to be a very big challenge. That's certainly something that I looked at and identified as, I think realistically, eyes wide open coming into this position, that's going to be a big challenge.
In what way? We're going to go to a vote before you even really, we're going to a vote at town meeting.
Yep.
So what makes it a challenge for you as manager?
Well, I think just any time that you're managing a large project like that, it is a challenge. You're talking funding, MSBA, design, it's a multi-year project. That's a big project. It's a challenge. It's a challenging project to work on. And I just mean in that respect.
Okay.
That's a big project. It's going to take up a lot of time and work and resources, and you're going to have a lot of folks involved. And so just in that sense.
Yep.
I'm curious what the funding plan, really is. I know you guys have a education stabilization fund. I would guess those funds are being earmarked towards some of the debt service on the school project, but I'm, curious about things like that. It certainly jumped out to me from, the research that I did in advance of coming here. Like I said, I saw a lot of really positive things between your budget and everything else. I think that the environmental issues going on in the community are really interesting. I'd be really interested to work on some of those. I think it's great, that 42% of the community is already protected land. There's a huge investment here in remaining bucolic, and we're having open space and preserving some of those rural features. I'm excited to work on those issues. I'm excited to do economic development in a community that values those aspects of their community as well. Like I said, I see that you guys are either in the process or planning to update some of your economic development work. I noticed, not in the position statement, but just from doing the research for the job, the EBSCO proposed garage for downtown seems like it's going to be a really neat, interesting project to work on as a land use kind of dork. It's interesting to me to read about it. So I think you guys have a lot of interesting stuff going on, but honestly, there was nothing major that jumped out to me that I thought, wow, I'm going to have to fix that right away. I mean, it seems like your ship is pretty right.
Okay.
And, it'd be a good place to come in.
I'm sure you're right. Thank you.
So to kind of answer one question you just asked and spin off of that, so the school stabilization fund, one of the primary purposes for that is we pass an override, and you have, basically from that override, you have a budget surplus from that they would then basically throw money into that stabilization fund, and then they get to the point where, I believe it's this year, where now they start drawing down off of that fund. So it's kind of like a savings account that goes up and down. Which leads me to my next point, which is, we had to pass an override. Danvers, to my understanding, has never dealt with that. And I think part of that is because you guys have a much larger business kind of community, much more developed economically. And when I look at Methuen, I don't know a ton about Methuen, but I think these are sort of bigger communities, more business development, whereas we have less. So hypothetically speaking, a couple weeks down the road, or whenever we announce it, say we announce, that we select you for a candidate, and people go, Methuen, Danvers. Ooh, we don't want to turn into Danvers. I know that's what some people will say. Ipswich is not Danvers. We don't want to be Danvers. And then at the same time, there's a quote from you saying, I'm ready to get into economic development, right? How are you going to come out and say, no, I get it, but this is what I'm envisioning, this is why Ipswich is different? How would you address this idea of economic development specifically tied to Ipswich?
Sure, that's a great question, and it's funny that you say that, because everyone in Danvers says they don't want to be Salem, and then they apologize to me because I live in Salem, so I'm very, is that what it is? Yeah, so I'm very accustomed to working in a community that does not want to be another community, and I think that's great, because Danvers knew what it was and who it was and what it wanted, and you guys know who you are and what you want, and that's why I say I'm excited to do economic development in a community that has such a already well-stated commitment to maintaining its rural nature and its open space, and so it means finding the right type of economic development, the right amount of economic development to fit into the balance here. The world is always changing. Business is always changing. There's businesses out there, micro businesses, small manufacturing, things like that didn't exist before, that could fit in seamlessly in a community like this if that's what the community wants. But it's listening to the community. I mean, this community is 90%, residential open space, and if the messaging is, we like that, we want to stay at those percentages, then you follow in that path, and you're respectful of that. I certainly would never want to come into one community and try to make it anything else. Danvers and Methuen are larger, but I mean, you guys have a $55 million spending plan for next year. That's not an insignificant amount of money. It's not like a small Western Mass, maybe, type of community. This is a big operation here, and so I think the skills and the abilities, the things that I have will translate well, but, in order to be successful, you have to listen, you have to know what this community wants. And so economic development is different everywhere, but, I think there can be a place for it here. It just has to be respectful of the goals of this community.
Just a quick follow-up.
Sure.
So do you have any ideas? Like when you drove through town today, when you read up on us, is there anything that you thought, here's a development that could actually fit. Here's a way that they could grow. How, maybe not just economically, but how do you think you could make Ipswich better?
Sure. Well, I mean, I don't know that growth is necessarily the answer. I mean, that's what I'd have to come here and learn is what are the goals of the community? And I think that, getting out and meeting people and talking to them and learning about that and having a better understanding of, what the community wants and then being able to add my expertise into that certainly is going to help make Ipswich better. It's going to lead those programs, lead those projects, be somebody that can bring together, different forces in the community. I mean, honestly, I don't sit here today and have a specific project in mind, but I can certainly envision that there's room for growth in this community if the community wants it, but it needs to be measured. I mean, you don't want to change the character of it. There's so much history here. It's so beautiful when you drive up. There's farms, there's open space, there's marsh. But I also think that, to the extent that the community says over time, we want that ratio to change a little. We want to be 85%, 15%. There is room to do it and to do it right, but it needs to be done thoughtfully, and it needs to be done at the right pace.
Okay.
So, Rob, my next question for you is on hiring and firing inside of this building.
Okay.
So, how much weight do you give to the department heads when it comes time to hire a new, whether it's part-time or full-time employee? Is it, do you take their recommendation and make that hire, or do you use a committee to help make that hire? How does it work?
I think it depends on the level of position. If you're hiring a more senior position, I think that that's something you would do probably more by committee. If it's a more junior position, depending, you may just have the department head meet with the person. But, fit's really important. And if somebody's going to work within somebody's department, then, the folks in the department should have an opportunity to meet the person and, obviously speak. I would never want to hire somebody and say, no, you go work in so-and-so's department, and they don't know about it or they haven't been involved. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, maybe you get lucky and that's successful, but, that's not how I would do things. And that wouldn't be consistent with the type of respect and the type of management style that I would take with people, is to not come in over them and say, you're going to do this. But, I'm not trying to be too general, but I think it somewhat depends. I mean, if you're hiring, say, an assistant department head, you're going to probably have a couple rounds of interviews, maybe one with staff from the department, maybe some other department heads. If you're hiring a lower level position, it may just be one interview with the department head. I might not even get involved. They may just make a recommendation to me and say, this is the person that, we think makes sense for the position.
So let's stay on the assistant department head role. So again, if there's and I would assume that when you came in, you would instill your own system on process of how someone would get hired. So when that ultimate decision is going to be made, and I as a department head say to you, I want Linda to be my assistant department head. That's who I want. How much weight does that carry with you?
A tremendous amount of weight. I mean, I think I would probably, again, it's hard to tell, but I probably would want to meet with the person and just make sure I agreed, and if I had reservations, we would talk about it. But, I mean, ultimately, that's something I think you have to defer to people, and you have to build that trust.
Good.
So can you tell us a little bit about your approach to setting goals with employees and with the Board of Selectmen and helping us to stay on track with those goals throughout the year?
Sure. So one thing that we did in ICAM Methuen, which I thought was a great process, is we would, myself and the IT director would sit down and talk about what our annual goals were, kind of our 6-month, 9-month, 12-month, 18-month goals, both for budgeting purposes, but both because we really were trying to raise the status of the IT department, have it be a business partner, have it be a department that, folks came to to plan out IT, not just when they had problems. And so we put together, I think this year we had 2 pages of projects and ideas and things that we were interested in accomplishing. We kind of prioritized them and then met with the whole IT team to talk over them, kind of see who wanted to grab which things in addition to their regular duties, and then set quarterly goals within the department to what we're going to accomplish. And so we set out our quarterly goals, and then each quarter, as we're setting the next quarter's goals, we look back and just kind of see how we're doing with those. And I think it's been really great for prioritizing. It's really great for keeping things on track. It's been really great for breaking projects down into a way that they're manageable. Again, when it comes to the Board of Selectmen, I'd be curious to learn what process you guys have for visioning, for setting policy, for, how you guys approach what you're doing right now. I know there's some communities out there doing really interesting things. I was talking with the folks in Bedford about a process they use. They've borrowed from the corporate world, where they actually have a formal visioning process with the Board of Selectmen, the town manager, the assistant town manager. They all get together, and everyone kind of has an opportunity to put out what their ideas are, what their goals are, what they want to see happen, and they flesh them out amongst each other and try to reach a consensus. And it's a nice process, I think, because then you're able to give clear direction to the manager and then down to the folks in town of, the direction we're going in, why we're doing the things we're doing, why we're approaching things the way that we're approaching them. People have an opportunity to have an actual process to weigh those concerns, questions. Everyone's on the same page. People aren't guessing. And it makes it a lot easier as a manager then to be clear and open and communicate with staff about why we're doing things. I think people are happier and do better work when they understand why they're doing what they're doing, how it fits in the greater organization. You're not necessarily just doing a park improvement. You're doing a park improvement because this program is coming and it's going to benefit the community. And so giving people that ownership of things, starts with the top. And so I have some ideas about what I'd like to see, but I would want to know how you guys are already doing things first.
Can you tell us about one of those ideas?
Well, something along the lines of what I just mentioned, I think is really interesting. I think there's in a community of this size, it makes sense to probably have some formal process on either an annual or semi-annual basis of giving town leadership an opportunity to really get together and talk through things and not, have it just be kind of a laundry list.
Right.
To have that direction and,
Yep.
yeah.
Thanks.
I wrote down a phrase you used a little earlier, and maybe if you were to give us 25 words on that, I think you're probably pretty good at this, and it seems to be the flavor of what I'm hearing. You said servant leadership? Sure. What is that exactly?
I think people use the term differently, but for me, what it means is leading collectively and leading collaboratively. It's not a top-down kind of pyramid approach to leadership. It's saying everyone's input is welcome, that I'm here to serve my employees as much as I'm here to serve the public. And so for me, it's just having an open, collaborative, engaged approach to being a leader. I don't know everything. I can't do everything by myself. I'm going to need a lot of help to be successful here, and I need to be available to folks to have it. And I don't come to this with a lot of ego. And so I know when I don't know something, I know to ask for help. I don't have a problem being vulnerable and saying, you know more about this than I do, please help me. And so it's all that approach to me.
Now, in those few and rare situations where servant leadership doesn't work, what's the next thing on your palette that you would appeal to?
Well, I think that I wouldn't say it doesn't work, but I think even within that approach, there are times when you still have to be the person and you have to be responsible and willing to be responsible. And that just means that you've taken in everybody's input and you've processed it. And then you say, now I've made my decision. And folks may not always like it. I think it is usually well received better when people know that your decision was made after all of that input and not without it. So I think it does work, but I wouldn't be looking to take on a position like this if I was not comfortable and actually wanting to be the responsible person. You're not looking to take on a role where the buck does stop with me. And so the more that I can do to understand everybody else's job and the more that I can understand and do to make the organization better as a whole, hopefully there's going to be less situations where there has to be that heavy responsibility. But, that's the good work that you put in every day.
Robin, can you tell us about a time that you worked through an idea and despite obstacles convinced the organization to sort of run with your idea?
Sure. I think the direct deposit example I gave earlier.
What is it?
I think the direct deposit example that I gave earlier, that project is one of those. When we first rolled it out, I think some people were skeptical. They said, we tried that previously and it didn't work. And I said, well, there's new technology, so, let's revisit it. But I think, anytime you're making a change in the organization, you're going to have those obstacles.
Right.
But it's about taking the right approach to doing it,
Right.
to get those things accomplished. When I was in Methuen, before I got there, they had twice tried to outsource their IT department. After I got there, we were successful in outsourcing the IT department. That's not necessarily a model that I think would work everywhere, but, they had some issues that needed to be dealt with that made sense there. And that was another example of just going through the process, educating folks. They ultimately saved over $500,000 and fixed some critical issues, in that process. My experience in Danvers was the complete opposite. We had a well-built, internal, fully functioning and staffed IT department. But, it's about educating people, taking the right time to accomplish things.
Okay. Do you have any novel ideas around municipal finance that, it sounds to me like a relatively simple piece of arithmetic, right? We have a tax base, and unless we have growth or an override, new growth and an override basically are limiting factors, right? So, am I missing something? Is it that simple, or?
I mean, there's the basic approach to municipal finance, but I think the more that you get into it and the more that you learn about it, the more you go out and talk to people, you're going to find there's actually a lot of people out there doing a lot of really interesting things. And, they probably can enhance the experience. Different communities have different philosophies. Some communities want to tax the levy every single year because they need to raise those funds and they need to get those funds in. Some like to leave more capacity in case there's an issue. There's a lot of different approaches that you can take to how you do your financing.
What do you think?
I think it depends. If you're in a community like Danvers that prides itself on never having an override and never having a debt exclusion, you have to really look towards getting closer to your levy. If you're in a community like Ipswich where there's been that support in the past for when you need it by way of overrides or exclusions, you don't necessarily have to be, right up to the point of the levy. It really does depend on the community. There's communities out there that don't like to carry debt in their operating, so they do debt exclusions for almost any, major capital. That's a way to keep debt down. It's a way to have a better debt ratio. It's a way to be able to handle, problems when they come. I think that if you can do it, if you can manage it, that's a nice approach to take sometimes. So you want to buy a fire truck, you do a debt exclusion. So there is a lot that you can do differently. And like I said, the more that you get out and talk to people and the more that you learn what's going on in different communities, the better you can be about being creative with some of that. The planning, the forecasting, obviously having a capital plan is really important to your finances because you're able on a year-to-year basis to see what can we afford out of free cash, what can we afford out of operating, what's coming down the line. You don't have as many surprises. You guys have a nice system for that. I see you have a capital plan, but you also have that matrix that lets you value the kind of the necessities of things, which is important, I think. So that's nice. It looks like you have some of those structures in place, but for me, that's, the finance area is where you can get creative and you can have some fun and you can do some things. And so I'm always learning in that area. I'm always trying to see what other people are doing. It's been one of the more interesting and rewarding parts of getting away from the legal side of it and into the general government side of this for me.
Great. Thank you.
So I'm looking at our time, and we've been, bugging you challenging you for an hour. So I guess it's time. Do you have any questions for us? And if you don't, or after we finish them, if you want to provide us with some type of, closing statement or comments.
You addressed my school question. I was curious about how you do that. Danvers obviously does, do it differently. They pack money into school stabilization every year to build up, similar to you, to draw down, but it doesn't come from an override. It comes out of the budget.
Yep.
So that, that was a question. I guess I'm curious from you folks. I know we've touched on some of them, obviously, the natural resources issues and things like that. But if I come into the position, I want to come in, eyes wide open. And what am I missing? What have we not talked about, that I should know? Are there challenges are coming down the road? Even, major retirement, succession planning. What's your vision?
It depends on where you sit, like everything else, right? There are a number of things, I think budgeting is always a tough thing. We've got maybe, several $100,000 that we, on which to decide on the budget every year across the entire municipal budget, and the $19 million. We're really only talking about a couple $100,000 really. The rest is labor, really, in essence. The rest is labor, and now we have a trash situation where our trash contract's expiring, and there goes that couple $100,000.
I saw that.
That's one thing.
I'd say one of the things that we have that's going to be interesting is it's not finalized yet, but one of the things we have set up in our capital plan is to basically redo our community development plan.
Yep.
And that's proposed to be a 2-year process. And it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of it and also see how well we stick to it. I think you asked or you mentioned forms, and I think
Yeah.
Ed left. I'm assuming we don't use those forms at all.
Yeah, I was going to say, my answer to how well the forms are being used, 2 words. Which form?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so I think that's, to me, that's going to be interesting is how well does the process work? How much buy-in does it get from the community? And then how closely can we stick to it?
I think we have some really hot topic issues in the next 12 months between a school and a downtown parking facility or whatever it is you want to call it. And I think the long-range economic development just of the downtown area and just, increasing the attractiveness of it and coming up with outside-the-box ideas to help with the downtown. I mean, I think, just keep doing what we've always been doing doesn't necessarily always work, and just having a new, fresh eye come in and give us some ideas that might have worked somewhere else is always something that I think we as a community and as a board need to embrace. So, yeah, I think the big things are just get through the couple huge things that we have in front of us now, but then also what do we do about revitalizing or keeping the growth happening downtown?
Well, we've talked about the trash contract and growth in town. We're also probably going to be hopefully looking at how to combine or build new public safety facilities down the road. So that will definitely be an issue, a challenge to see how that. We're going to be looking at new ambulance contracts coming up, so that will also be priority.
Yeah, I think what we are on the cusp of doing is thinking about Ipswich over the next 3 to 5, maybe 10 years. 10 years is a little hard to determine, but I do think to have a common understanding of where we are going. We're going to be different, I think, whether we do anything about it or not. How we're going to be different is the question. We have, just from what you've been listening to, between new school, public safety, issues of downtown parking, and/or combination with a different residential pattern downtown. Where are we going to park cars during the day, and who are we going to annoy in the process if we make a modification there? In our utilities, we have a number of issues that relate to our wastewater treatment structure, getting the stuff to the plant. Right now, we have some extremely vulnerable spots along the line that need to be corrected sooner rather than later. Water is always a problem. You wouldn't think so the last few months, but indeed, the storage of water, we really don't have capacity to do that. It probably is a multi-town or regional solution, but we do have to take a look at not only surface water, but groundwater. We are looking at perhaps interfering with some local agricultural activities if we are going to do more wells. We have all of these things that are all in the future of Ipswich, and in part, it probably is going to be a more expensive community to live in, which causes some members of the community real angst, particularly some of our older members of the community. There are ways to shield some of our folks who are on fixed incomes and give them some hope that they can stay here at tolerable cost would be good. I'm not sure what we have either at the local, state, or national level to help with that. It would be helpful to have someone mining those resources on a regular basis. I think we do not do as much as we possibly can in terms of seeking out those additional resources. Frequently, those additional resources come with onerous requirements that we're not prepared to live up to. I think in terms of the look and feel during the seasons, we probably need to do a time and effort to maintaining the overall condition of the town. And you add all that up, a lot of money, and every one of those has a supporter. And I'm sure some of them have people that say, you know, we can get along without that. There you go.
Well, those were very thoughtful answers. I appreciate, just having that understanding of the priorities and where things are going. A lot of things on this list I feel like I have good experience with, know something about, I've worked with, and I think I would bring a lot to a lot of those issues and those questions for you. So I want to thank you for having me in today and for including me in the process. And I definitely think that, I would bring a lot to this position. I think it'd be an excellent fit here. And it's a great community, a lot of great people. It's a beautiful community, and it's definitely one that were you to, proceed with me in the process, I would long-term look very favorably about joining as a resident as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We agree with many of those comments. We love it. It's a beautiful community. And